Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees for October 22nd, 2024. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karsbach.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Here.
Trustee Wing.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Kurtz.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy will be absent this evening.
Thank you, Clerk. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone in the audience tonight to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda. Things on tonight's agenda including LEDA, the water information, and any of the code corrections here, which will also be a public hearing. I'll open that up to individual public comment. Do we have anyone signed up? Okay. Anyone wish to speak under general public comment that did not have an opportunity to sign up? All right. Let's move on now to consent. Would trustees like any items removed from consent? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, Trustee Kurtz has moved on the agenda. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Wing.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht.
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz.
Yes.
Mayor Karsbach.
Yes. Okay, moving on to our regular agenda tonight. We'll start with LEDA 911. This is an update, and we have folks from LEDA here tonight, as well as our Public Information Officer, Stephanie Horvath. What?
Horvath.
Oh, sorry, Horvath.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Our crisis communications plan centers around the delivery of accurate and timely information to our community. It also offers guidance for communicating with the media and other agencies. The Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority, LEDA 911, NOPO Alert, is an agency that is instrumental in disseminating information to a large number of people in a short amount of time. You probably heard from them during the Alexander Mountain Fire by text. Val Turner is the Chief of Staff for the Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority, and she's here to present an overview of their agency.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, board members. My name again is Val Turner. I am Chief of Staff for the Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority. I've been with the authority for about 12 years now, and I was invited tonight to just give you a high-level overview of our organization and what we do. So, we are the governing authority over 911 for both Larimer and Jackson counties. We provide oversight to 911, 911 technology, and the programs that we fund in Larimer County. Within this region, we have 6 911 centers, 5 in Larimer County, 1 in Jackson County. We have 31 government partners that are made up of all of the cities, towns, fire, EMS districts, including one state university, Colorado State University, and the National Park. Just to give you a little bit of overview of the history of LEDA, we were formed through an IGA in 1990. So we've been around for quite a while. We've done lots of things, but these are just some highlights of what we've done. We hired an executive director in 2006. So she's been with us for quite a while. She still leads the organization as our CEO, Kimberly Culp. We implemented text to 911 in 2014. We were the first in the state of Colorado to go with the big carriers. And so if you didn't know that you can text 911 in Larimer and Jackson counties, you can do that. If you aren't able to speak or anything like that, you can text 911 here in Larimer County. We are in our current building now. We moved there in 2020, and we have a backup emergency communication center there. So we have a backup site for all 6 of our PSAPs to be able and come to our building and work out of our PSAP if they need to evacuate for any reason. We also have some awesome technology that I want to highlight for you guys a little bit later, but I did mention that we regionalized with Jackson County. That was just in 2023. So that is a new addition to our team, and we have gotten them updated on their phone equipment and things like that. So I'm going to go over how 911 is funded just briefly. We're funded through 911 surcharge, both at the state level and the local level. So at the state level, there's a 9 cent per month per line surcharge on phone bills that we collect. And then there's also a prepaid wireless surcharge. So if you go to Walmart or anything like that and you buy a prepaid phone at any of those locations, they do take a surcharge right off the top of that, and it is provided back to us. And then our local surcharge is currently set at $1.10 per line per month. And there is a threshold set by the PUC, so we cannot go higher than $2.12. The average around the state is at $1.97. We are at $1.10 right now. You'll see that the highest is Phillips County at $4. You do have to make a special request to the PUC to go higher than that threshold. And the lowest surcharge right now in the state is at 70 cents. So we're hanging right now at $1.10. We will be increasing that surcharge in 2025. Through that 911 surcharge, we're able to do a lot of things in Larimer and Jackson County. This is just a high-level overview of some of the things that we're able to fund with the surcharge. And so some of the things that I wanted to highlight for you is our CPE. It's our call processing equipment through the Viper system. So this is the telephone system that our 911 dispatchers use to answer emergency calls in Larimer County. We also do standardized dispatcher training. So we have what we call an ETC program. It's an emergency telecommunicator program, and we send all new 911 dispatchers in Larimer and Jackson County through this program just to give them a standard level of training. We also fund the emergency alert system, which I'm going to get into a little bit more, and then some awesome technology through Prepared and Rapid SOS that I'm going to highlight for you tonight, just to give you an overview of the tools that our dispatch centers have at their fingertips. So Rapid SOS is a software that we use to gather caller location information. So a lot of times, especially people who are not familiar with this area, but maybe tourists, if they have to call 911, they may not know where they are. Especially with wireless calls, we aren't able to tell exactly where the caller is. We may get latitude and longitude that will give us kind of a general area of where they are. But Rapid SOS takes that GPS information from their phone and gives us a very accurate location of where they are. So you'll see the pins on the map here throughout the county. All of our dispatchers are able to see 911s as they present to the centers. They pop up on the map, and it not only shares their location information, but we can get information directly from their phone, such as their language preference, their health data. It also does crash detection, which will allow us to know, sometimes they can't even call 911, but we will get a crash detection alarm through Rapid SOS. One of the things that I did want to show you through Rapid SOS, you'll see on this picture, on the map, we can pinpoint exactly where they are through what we call breadcrumbing. So if a person calls 911 and they start walking around in the area, it leaves breadcrumb trails so we can see exactly where the caller is walking. We can also use the person on the map to drag it to that pinpoint, and it will show us that aerial imagery of exactly what corner they may be standing on when they call 911. So awesome technology that we have at our fingertips to locate people if they aren't able to give us that information. We also have a technology called Prepared. This one is fairly new, but it allows dispatchers to not only gather location information, just like Rapid SOS did, but it allows them to not only text us, but share video as well. And they have awesome tools within this technology for language translation. They can translate in multiple languages. We also can get audio recordings and audio transcript. So it allows us to maybe key in on words or things that the caller's saying that we may not hear with the ear, but that transcription will get for us. So this technology has proven extremely valuable here in Larimer County. This photo here is actually a video, and I'll try to play it for you. It doesn't even need audio, but this is a video that the 911 caller was able to share with our 911 dispatcher. They were explaining this fire, worried that it was going to spread into a wildfire. It was in way northern Larimer County, almost to the Wyoming border, and the Larimer County Sheriff's Office was about to send planes to dump water on this, and we were able to share this video with first responders. That's an amazing part of this tool, is that we can share it with the first responders. They can see the fire in real time, and Larimer County determined we don't need a fixed wing plane for this. A helicopter will work just fine. They saved thousands of dollars with this technology. It gives our 911 dispatchers eyes into the scene where we only had ears at one time. So this has been an awesome tool. We found lost hikers were able to share their location, and emergency services could find the caller based on just the video they were seeing in front of them. So awesome technology that we're excited to have at our fingertips. Moving into emergency alerts, this is really the reason that I'm here. LEDA staff is trained to send emergency alerts throughout Larimer County and Jackson County. We also do have certified senders in our 911 centers as well. We can also send IPAWS alerts. Those are the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System alerts. So we are able to hit cell towers and send emergency alerts to all cell phones within a cell tower range. Similar to what you would get with an Amber Alert is what we can do. We can also send alerts through broadcast radio and television, and we can also send emergency alerts to weather radios. Now it's scenario based, so sometimes we don't send IPAWS alerts. The last time we sent an IPAWS alert was when we evacuated the town of Estes Park for the Cameron Peak fire. It is very valuable if we need to reach an area where there's lots of tourists that may not be opted in to our system, and people who are recreating. So if we have areas of high recreation where people may not be opted in, IPAWS is a great tool for us. So we use the emergency alert system for imminent threat to life only. We do have within our emergency alert system the ability to send non-emergency alerts as well. So what happens here is I have just a map of kind of the Berthoud area. All of those little dots on the map that you see are people that are opted into our system, whether that be a landline phone or if they've gone to our website to create an account. Every one of those dots is someone who is registered within your community. So I just looked it up. You have just over 6,000 people signed up through the Citizen Opt-in portal. So that's different from the landlines. We automatically load landline data into our system. The Citizen Opt-in is specific to the people that come to our website and create an account. That allows them to receive emergency alerts through their cell phone, via text message, email, and things like that. So our emergency alert system does require participation from your community, and it requires them to take action. I wanted to highlight just a few of the things that we use in our emergency alert system. We have a lot of tools at our fingertips. It doesn't mean that for every scenario we use all of these different tools, but we use them based on the scenario and which tools would work best. So again, like I said, we purchase landline data that's automatically put into the system. Your community uses the Everbridge system to send non-emergency alerts. So we have a keyword that you guys use. It's TOB events that you can use to contact your community members about events that are going on in Berthoud. And you also use it for West Nile virus spraying. So lots of different communities within Larimer County are contacting us about the use of keywords. It's such an awesome tool because it doesn't require someone to go online and create an account. All they have to do is text a keyword on their cell phone, and they are automatically opted in to receive those alerts. So it's a great tool. They don't have to do much. They don't have to provide us any information. It's a quick way to opt in. And then when they leave your community or they're done with the event, they can reply stop, and they're opted out of those alerts. So it's been a great, great tool for lots of different things. We use it for the Taste of Fort Collins, 4th of July events around Larimer County. It's just an easy way to get those tourists. The reason we got it in the first place was all the tourists that go through Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. We thought if there's an emergency, how are we going to contact these people? So Estes Park does a great job of advertising that. They can text NOCO alert to 888-777 during their time here in Larimer County, and they'll receive all emergency alerts. Some of the other things that I wanted to highlight was the language translation and DeafLink. And so ReachWell is an app that we use. It's a third-party vendor that we use for language translation. This app is super simple. Your residents only have to find the app on their phone, download it, they select the language they want to receive emergency alerts in, and they will receive push notifications when we send an emergency alert. So while we are only able to send emergency alerts in English, vendors like ReachWell help us communicate to those citizens who want to receive alerts in a different language. So we've been using ReachWell for a couple of years now to not only do emergency alerts, but like the town of Estes Park, they use it for non-emergency alerts as well. And then DefLink rounds out our emergency alert system as far as accessibility. DefLink is another vendor that we use through the state of Texas is where they're based, but we are able to send emergency alerts via American Sign Language with this. And so this has been an awesome tool for us. And as soon as we send that alert, they create the video, they sign it, and we're able to post it on our website. And those who are signed up to receive the alerts in American Sign Language also receive an email or a text message with that video link. So it's been great. It can also activate bed shakers and braille readers for those who need those services. And that is through, it's kind of a different sign-in page, but they can access that through our NOCO Alert webpage. And then I wanted to talk just briefly on disaster management and the role that LEDA plays when we have a big disaster in Larimer County. We work closely with the Emergency Operations Center, or the EOC. When we have emergencies, LEDA sends the alerts in conjunction with the agency that's taking lead on that. And one of the cool tools that we just added is the device that you see in front of you. This is called a CRD, or a Compact Rapid Deployable. It's also known as a COW. So you may hear that we're deploying a COW. It's a cell on wheels, and it allows us to give emergency communications to field responders. So really, we use this device in areas where our first responders may not have good cell coverage while they're working a fire or flood or some type of disaster. We are able to deploy this. So we have a team of people that can deploy it, but the LEDA staff can also deploy this. We do everything from making sure that 911 infrastructure isn't impacted. During the Alexander Mountain fire, we had fire right underneath our 911 lines. And if those 911 lines went down, the town of Estes Park would have no 911 service. So we acted and got that taken care of. We also do 911 dispatcher staffing. So during the 2013 floods, I went up to Estes Park and helped them dispatch because a lot of their dispatchers were displaced during that flood. So we do that. We do COW deployments, and we manage 24/7 citizen communication. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. But NOCO Alert is our webpage. So nocoalert.org is really the website for all things emergency alerts. So it has become the one-stop shop during disasters where citizens can come and look at where the evacuation areas are. We have a map on that webpage, and we'll have the polygons on the map. We'll have the language of the alert. During the Cameron Peak fire in 2020 is kind of where this grew, and it really took off. We had almost 15 million views on our map during the Cameron Peak fire, and it's only gotten better since then. During the Alexander Mountain fire, we had more than 5 million views on our webpage, that map specifically in only an 11-day period. So when I talk about citizen communication during disasters, we have Text Request is the app that we use, and it allows citizens to text us questions. So when we have a disaster, of course, we have tons of questions from citizens. Really, our goal with this text request is to take those 911 calls and those inquiries that may go to the dispatch centers out of the dispatch center so we can assess them and answer those questions for them. So in 2024 already, we've done over 12,000 text messages that we've done with citizens, and it's not just during events, it's every day. We have citizens texting us about different things. But this is just a way that we can communicate with citizens during disasters until a formal joint information center is stood up by that agency. And so it's been really great. During the Alexander Mountain fire, we did over 10,000 text messages in just 11 days. So it really is an all hands on deck approach at LEDA, whether it's us deploying a COW or sending emergency alerts. During the Alexander Mountain fire, our staff alone sent 30 emergency alerts during that time, and we handled 210 phone calls. So we really do what we can to take that pressure off of the dispatch centers so they can handle the emergency event, and we come alongside them to help them in those situations. So I know that was fast, huge high-level overview of what we do, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
There's companies like Garmin, I think it's even embedded in like the Apple iPhone now, there's like satellite communications. I
Yes.
think you can text 911. So does that look any different on your end? Are you able to receive those kind of satellite-based emergency alerts?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So the satellite devices are a little bit more difficult when it comes to emergency alerts and communicating with them that way. But as long as you have service and you're able to, some of those Garmin devices don't allow either inbound or outbound communication. And so that can be a little bit tricky. I would highly suggest that people look into that with their provider before they buy a device.
Yeah.
But as long as you have cell phone service, what we found is you can get a text out
Yeah.
more likely than you could a phone call in those areas where you have less phone service.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Super informative.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was awesome. Two quick questions.
Yes.
One is, on your deaf link.
Yeah.
If I can read it, why do I need sign language?
Yeah, so there are folks that are hard of hearing and deaf hard of hearing. So they have different needs. We do have people who represent those communities on some of our 911 committees statewide that tell us it's even different. People who are deaf don't read the same way, or they've grown up with American Sign Language. And so that's what they use rather than even written
Okay,
text.
okay.
Yes.
And then the other thing, with the funding that comes in,
Mhm.
so you get an X amount of revenue that comes in, then do you build your budget around that? So you know how much resources you can have?
Yep, absolutely. And that's where, all of those things that we can fund, we fund far more than that. But we do. We anticipate, we look at trends with how many people are buying phones and how many phones residents have and things like that. And we anticipate growth or decline. Obviously, we're seeing landlines decline, and the growth of even VoIP phones is getting really high now, growing probably even more than cell phones at this point.
What kind of phones?
The VoIP, voice over internet protocol
Okay.
phones. And so we're seeing that grow as well, and we just anticipate that growth and budget around that.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Let's from the trustees.
I just had a couple
Yes,
things.
please.
I just want to thank you for coming. Every time you guys come, it's a reminder that we need to get our people to sign up.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you had the statistics on the current Berthoud sign up stats. I don't, maybe our staff does, but I know Berthoud has tended to be on a lower sign up than the other members of the county. So I wanted to see if we're getting any better at getting our residents signed up, or if we're still kind of tracking in the.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to trends, how it's been going, but we're at just over 6,000 people. And speaking with Stephanie, I think that's a good number. And even looking at the map that I showed you, you guys have quite a few dots on there. So I think you're doing really well. We really enjoy coming to Berthoud, to some of your events and making those connections where we can have those one-on-one conversations. We're happy to assist and participate in that to help those numbers go up. I can't speak to landline data. I didn't look that up for you, but I can definitely get that info for you.
Sure. Yeah, I was just curious, when I was with Berthoud Fire, I remember one of the biggest things that we talked about was the push for getting people to know what LIDA is, how to sign up, and how to, keep their information updated too as they change houses, or if they're visiting a new location or their work location. And so I was just trying to brainstorm ways that we can help people keep it, like an annual reminder that's maybe more than just putting in our mailer. So I don't know if you guys have any creative ideas for us doing a big push for our community, especially since we've doubled since like COVID.
Yeah.
Like we have an entirely new community now that doesn't know, like when the fires came, a lot of people were terrified that the fires were gonna come wipe out Berthoud. And so it'd just be great to be able to have a big LIDA push. If you guys have any education budget that we can, work on some ideas on what we could do for Berthoud, kind of update education for everyone that's new to Berthoud. So it's just something to think about, but I would love to have that conversation and make sure you guys are amazing. Just having worked with you guys over the years, like the life-saving measures, like even having the cow deployed, like that's such a big thing for those wildfires. So I'm just excited you guys are growing and doing amazing things. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to partner. We do have a budget, lots of materials that we can help share.
Awesome.
So yeah, be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Before you go, I just want to make sure there's not anyone in the audience that has a question for Chief of Staff Turner. All right. Well, thank you very much.
right,
Very
thank you.
informative. Appreciate you coming all the way down.
Absolutely.
Awesome to have you guys. All right, we can move now to water basics in our portfolio resources. I think we have several people here tonight, but I'll be kicked off by our Public Works Director, Ken Matthews.
Thank you, Mayor Carsbeck, trustees. So when Chris and I were talking about kind of how we wanted to stage things, my thought was we've got a ton of stuff going on here in the water side of things. So kind of walking through all those various facets, so that we also have some new trustee members. So we thought it would be good to kind of walk through our water portfolio. Pete with Renish and Reich is going to do that for us. He's got a kind of a little description of Water 101, so to speak, of our portfolio, what it means legally and what it means in gallons. Also, we track all of that information very carefully with respect to water that we bought, water that we've allocated for development, and so on and so forth, water and how that's tracking with our current demand. Andrew Case with LRE back there is going to then, after Pete, talk about where we're at today. We're calling it our snapshot. And that's kind of a look at where we're at right now. We're doing that twice a year. And then lastly, Savannah and I, and Savannah back in the back, is our new project engineer for the town. She works for the town. Very, very lucky to have Savannah on board. She and I are going to walk through the actual projects, the capital work, the regulatory work that we have going on right now for, water quality, capacity, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the lay of the land. Let's go ahead and start with Pete.
Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here tonight. Nice to see all of you that I've seen before and some of the new faces on the board too. So as Ken said, I'll give kind of a basic overview of the town's water supply portfolio, and then go into some of the projects that we've recently completed and some of the projects that are in the works, hopefully here in the near term, for continued development of the town's water resources portfolio. First, just a few things I always like to get out of the way. I always use these wonky terms during this presentation. So a couple of the things you'll hear me refer to here. First, one of the most fundamental aspects of Colorado water law is what's known as the appropriation doctrine, or the prior appropriation doctrine, which is a fancy legal term for what's underneath that, the concept of first in time, first in right. So this is the basic idea that underlies almost all of our water rights in Colorado here, which is those people that were here, those users that were here earlier in time, they can go into what's known as a water court here in their basin and get an order from the court that says your right has this fixed date based on when you were first beneficially using your water. And so then that water user gets a superior right compared to all of the other users that come later in time. And so this is a really important doctrine in that it can make for dramatic differences between the water resources portfolios of communities that might be right next door to each other, right? But for example, here on the Front Range, Berthoud has some very senior water rights, as we'll get to. Communities like Longmont, Boulder, some of the older, more established communities have older, more senior water rights that they're working with. And so they kind of have a head start on developing their water resources portfolios compared to communities that developed more rapidly later in time. So you'll hear me talk about the priority of different water rights as we go through here. Also, just a couple units of measure that I'll talk to as I go through here. An acre foot is kind of the standard volumetric volume of water that we use in the water rights world. It's about 325,000 gallons. And the cubic foot per second is the standard flow rate measurement that we use. 1 cubic foot per second is about 450 gallons per minute. To put that in context, your average garden hose at your house is probably somewhere between 10 and 15 gallons per minute. And then the last one is a SFE, or a single family equivalent. This is the standard unit we use for analyzing water demands. And the reason it's called a single family equivalent is it's a unit that relates to the standard annual demand for a single family residence within the respective community. Here in Berthoud, your SFE value is 0.4 acre feet per year. That's a value that's fixed in the code. So every time a new tap, a new connection comes online to serve a single family residence, if it equates to 1 SFE anyway, then that is a water demand of 0.4 acre feet per year from the town's water resources portfolio. So getting into the overview of the town's overall water rights portfolio, first I'll speak to the native rights in the town's portfolio. By native, I mean rights that are sourced from your local watersheds here, which in Berthoud's case really means the Big Thompson watershed, to a lesser degree the Little Thompson watershed. So got a map here that will hopefully give you a little bit of the lay of the land and some context. Can you all see my cursor as I move around on the screen there? Is that helpful at all, or?
I can't. Can you
Can't
guys?
see it.
You can't either.
Okay. Well,
That's all right.
I'll speak in directional terms then, and colors and things. So in the green here, you can see, thanks, Christian. You're ahead of me. There we go.
Thanks.
See it now? Okay, great. So in the green shaded areas here are the current town limits. This may be slightly out of date. This map's a few years old, but more or less the current town limits. You can see the major watershed that the town's native water rights are sourced from are the Big Thompson River, which is running here through the city of Loveland, just to the north of the town. A couple important features to keep in mind on the Big Thompson River are the Handy Ditch Headgate up here, right near the dam store and kind of near the mouth of the Big Thompson Canyon, just to our west. That's an important ditch and an important source of water for the town and for local irrigators throughout this area. That ditch you can see in black here basically runs south and a little bit east towards the west side of Berthoud, and then it has various laterals that run further east from there that deliver water to the various irrigated areas, and including these reservoirs that Handy operates. The western reservoir they operate is Hertha Reservoir, which is here, a little bit to the west of town, and then directly west of town is Welch Reservoir, which is located there, which is the main storage reservoir for the Handy Ditch Company. Going just a little bit east from there, you'll see a label for Berthoud Reservoir. Can't really see the reservoir on this map, but that's located adjacent to the town's water treatment plant, which is this black dot here, and you can see that small label there. Sorry, these labels are pretty small and difficult to read. So that's where the town's water supply is taken in and treated for municipal uses and distributed throughout the town for those uses. The other important features here are Carter Lake, which I'll speak to more in a minute when we get to the non-native part of the town's water rights portfolio. But then going down here, the Little Thompson River is a major tributary of the Big Thompson that runs along the south end of town here. And you can see there the black dot where my cursor is now is where the town's wastewater treatment plant discharges the town's treated wastewater into the Little Thompson. And then that water flows down the confluence of the Little and Big Thompson rivers just a few miles east of I-25. And then just another maybe mile and a half, 2 miles from there is where the Big Thompson hits the South Platte River, the main stem of the South Platte River. So getting into the water rights themselves here, the most important of the town's native water rights are the what we call the senior water, or also known as the town's decree water. These are actually two different water rights that together constitute the #1 priority on the Big Thompson River. And so that means, again, getting back to the idea of a priority, that means that this water is, as long as there's physical water supply available from the river, no other water users on the Big Thompson River can call out the town and demand that they take water. The town has that ability to actually shut off all the other users on the Big Thompson River so that it can get its supply from this water. this water right, or this series of water rights. So that makes for a very reliable source of water for the town. You can see the average yield of this water right is actually over 2,100 acre feet per year. So this is really one of the key kind of backbone pieces of the town's water resources portfolio, particularly in the summer season, right? This water right is available from basically the end of April until the end of October. And so it's a critical source of supply for the town during the summer season when your water use increases dramatically due to a lot more outdoor irrigation going on. This water right was historically delivered through the Handy Ditch system, and actually way before my time, the town was really entirely reliant on the Handy Ditch system for its water supply. Now the water is delivered through the CBT system, which I'll explain a little bit more in a minute. But basically the way to think of it is it's coming through Carter Lake and being delivered from a pipeline from Carter Lake to the town. For various reasons, just a much more reliable way for the town to get delivery of this water through that system rather than through the Handy Ditch. But there are some limitations on the carriage capacity. We have a contract with the Bureau of Reclamation to utilize that CBT system in Carter Lake and the pipelines that are associated with that. And there are just times when there's either not capacity in that system for various reasons, or there's just not water available that can be diverted into the system from the Big Thompson River. So there are times when we can see outages. We actually had one earlier this month, and right now, actually, the town is not able to divert this water currently. So we're utilizing other sources at the moment. So the town has a number of other native water rights in its portfolio. This is going to be kind of a dizzying list to go through here. I won't bother you with all of the details here, but the town has over 40 shares in the Handy Ditch Company. Some of these shares have already been changed for municipal use, so they can be delivered to the town's water treatment plan and delivered for potable use throughout your system. As you'll hear in a minute, we're currently working on changing the remaining portions of the shares to be available for municipal use, but those are largely still used for irrigation uses within the Handy system. The town also has 34 shares of the Ryan Gulch Reservoir Company. These are also shares that are principally used for non-potable irrigation, but for which we're in a water court case right now, changing those shares to be available for the town's municipal use. The third on the list here are your Loveland Lake and Ditch Company shares. The town owns over half of the shares in the Loveland Lake and Ditch Company, which gives it a controlling interest in that company. And the other major shareholders are also very cooperative with the town. This source is a very important source for the town's non-potable irrigation system, which I'll talk more about here in a minute. The Welch contract rights, fourth on the list here, are just a different type of right in Welch Reservoir. So they're similar to the Handy Ditch shares, and these are contractual rights to receive water from Welch Reservoir. So just slightly legally different than Handy Ditch shares themselves, but again, these are and will continue to be an important source for the town's non-potable irrigation as well. Then last on this list anyway is the Home Supply Ditch. The town has 2 shares in that ditch company that are just used for a farm lease that the town operates. So those are not shares that the town uses for its municipal type uses. And then the town has a few other native water rights that it just recently acquired. It acquired 1 share in the Osborne Kaywood Ditch. Although 1 share doesn't sound like much, that's actually 1/3 of the total company stock. There are only 3 shares in the company total. So it is a significant amount of water. The Osborne Kaywood is also significant because that is the #1 priority on the Little Thompson River, which makes that water, more reliable compared to other water rights on the Little Thompson River, and also valuable for potential other future uses as well. In that same transaction, the town acquired 81 shares in the Boulder and Larimer County Irrigating and Manufacturing Ditch Company, the longest ditch company name that I know of in the state of Colorado. Also known as Old Ish shares, because these are Ish Reservoir. These are shares coming out of Ish Reservoir, if you're familiar with that, just southeast or southwest of town here. and the town acquired 81 of those shares. Both of these types of water rights are currently still contemplated to be used for irrigation of the historically irrigated farm, which we know as the Beefus Farm, kind of on the south end of town. So that's a really quick, broad overview of the native water rights in the town's portfolio. Now I get to talk through this big, complicated, busy map to explain the basics of the town's non-native portion of its water rights portfolio. So by non-native, we mean water that's coming not from the local basins here. And what that means in this case is water that's coming from the west slope and the headwaters of the Colorado River. So in this very busy map, I'll just point out a few key features here. This is basically an overview of the Colorado Big Thompson project, which is the major project owned and operated, well, I shouldn't say owned, operated by the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. The district itself is the green shaded area here, so you can see the district serves a very large portion of the northern Front Range area, and then continuing along the South Platte River watershed also serves irrigation water to a number of the agricultural users further down the South Platte watershed. The Colorado Big Thompson project itself was originally designed to provide irrigation water to this whole area, but in the Front Range part, the western area you see here, more recently in the last 20 to 30 years, a lot of that water has been converted to municipal use by communities like Berthoud and other growing communities in this area. A few other of the major aspects here are, you can see, well, let me use my pointer again here. There we go. This line here is the Continental Divide, and then to the west of that line, you see Lake Granby, Grand Lake, and Shadow Mountain Reservoir, all up in the headwaters of the Colorado River. Those are the primary storage reservoirs for the Colorado Big Thompson project on the west slope. From there, water is delivered through this red dashed line, which is a tunnel basically going right underneath Rocky Mountain National Park and over to the Estes Park area. And then water is conveyed via pipeline down to a series of reservoirs here on the east slope for storage and eventual use by users here on the Front Range and throughout the area that the district provides water to. The major reservoirs to know on the east slope here are Carter Lake down in this area, and then Horsetooth Lake up by Fort Collins. Those are the large major storage reservoirs on the east slope side of the project. The other thing I'll point out quickly here is this up in the upper left-hand corner is an inset of the west slope storage facilities. And down here in the corner of that one, you can see what's labeled the Windy Gap Reservoir. That's a small reservoir that up until a year ago was actually on channel and blocking the Colorado River, but they've since created a channel around that reservoir to reconnect the Colorado River and all that habitat through there, which was a monumental project that Northern was able to just recently complete. The Windy Gap Reservoir, the associated pipeline and pumps up to the Granby reservoirs are what I consider to be the kind of little brother project that Northern Water operates, which is the Windy Gap project. And the Windy Gap project came later in time, so again, water rights of a later priority. And it utilizes basically the same system that the CBT project uses to get water from the headwaters of the Colorado River to the Front Range. The difference being that it came later in time, so it can't take up space or capacity in the system that would otherwise be used by the CBT project. So that's a very limiting factor on the reliability and yield of the Windy Gap project. Is there are just times when, I mean, Northern is one of the most sophisticated, water managers in the state, and so they do the best they can, but there are just times when operationally they either don't have room in the reservoirs or there's not capacity in the pipelines to be able to pump this water back up into the reservoirs and then deliver it to the east slope. So it's a newer in time and slightly less reliable water resource compared to the CBT project. So with respect to the non-native water rights that the town does own in these various projects, The town owns 1,088 CBT units. These are units in the CBT project. Each of these units is equivalent to 0.6 acre-feet per unit per year of yield. That's a fixed amount in the town code, so that's what the town recognizes if someone is to bring these water rights for dedication to serve new development. That's the value that the town subscribes to those types of units. So that's about 650 acre-feet per year total for the town's 1,088 units. I should note that, you know, the actual yield of these units varies based on hydrological conditions from year to year. So in some years, the historical average is fairly close to 0.7 acre-feet per year. So this is kind of a conservative value that the town uses to value the units. But it can be even lower than that, and then obviously can be higher than that in years where Northern decides to allocate more water to those particular units. CBT units can be bought and sold, transferred without any water court proceedings, which makes them very fungible compared to other water rights, particularly in this area. They can also be used directly, upon getting the water from Northern, or they can be stored and used subsequently, which again makes them very, fungible and valuable. And because they're so fungible and valuable, they're also very expensive. They're one of the highest priced water resources in this area of the Front Range right now. I should also mention they're just, this is very high quality water coming from the Colorado River watershed. So that's another reason it's very expensive and valuable water. The town also has 10 units in the Windy Gap project. And the important thing to understand about units here is one CBT unit is not apples to apples to one Windy Gap unit. The CBT unit, that project was designed for basically a maximum yield of 1 acre-foot per unit per year. Windy Gap, the maximum yield it was designed for is approximately 100 acre-feet per unit per year. But you can achieve that kind of a yield from the project due to some of those operational constraints I was describing relative to the Colorado Big Thompson project. So what you need to be able to maximize the delivery and yield of these units is what we call firming storage, which means storage here on the east slope where you can store that water before you use it the first time. And because of the way the water rights were decreed by the water court for this project and the permitting associated with the project, there's a very limited subset of reservoirs and places on the east slope here where these units can be stored before they're used for the first time. That's why you may have heard of the Windy Gap Firming Project. Is a large reservoir they're building basically just on the west of the Hogback from Carter Lake. That's the major supplies of the storage bucket here on the east slope where Windy Gap units can be stored. Other than that, the options are very limited. When Berthoud acquired its Windy Gap units, the Windy Gap project was already fully subscribed. I mean, that's a project that's been in the works for 30 years, right? So it was already fully subscribed. Berthoud does not have any interest in the firming project itself. So we have to look to other creative ways to be able to firm and then reuse Berthoud's Windy Gap units. You'll hear more about that just here in a few minutes, which gets to the next point too. One of the key distinctions between Colorado Big Thompson units and Windy Gap units is that Windy Gap units are reusable. So this means when the town delivers Windy Gap water into its system, somewhere around, depending on the time of year, up to 90% of that water can come back through the wastewater collection and treatment system. And so the town can claim a credit for that water that's coming back and reuse that water either directly through, just direct reuse of effluent or by claiming a credit for that to offset water that the town is using in other ways in other locations. So the town is right now moving forward with plans to both firm and reuse its Windy Gap units, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute. So that's the basic overview of the major components of the town's overall water resources portfolio. Now I'll get into kind of the projects aspect of the presentation. In 2020, Andrew's outfit, LRE Water, did a update of the town's water resources master plan and made some recommendations about the future development of the town's water resources portfolio. Those recommendations were first to develop the reusable supplies in the town's existing portfolio. So these are the Windy Gap units, as I just mentioned, and then handy shares, once they're changed in water court. During that water court process, we claim the right to reuse those shares, and so then after that process is complete, those become reusable supplies that the town can use over and over again, thereby increasing the efficiency of the use of the town's existing resources and making more water available for growth and development within the town in that manner. The other recommendation was to develop and evaluate the non-potable irrigation system within the town. The major driver, major incentive to do this is treating water is expensive, and the infrastructure is expensive, and then the operations are expensive. And so the more you can minimize that, you can be more efficient in not using a lot of the town's resources to treat water that then is just being applied to irrigation use, and that treatment is basically unnecessary. So Ken in particular likes this because it allows the town to defer capital projects for improvements and upgrades to the water treatment plant, and to just be more efficient in the way the town is catering its delivery of water to the actual end use of that water. And so one of the sub recommendations here in the Water Resources Master Plan was for the town to continue to acquire Loveland Lake Ditch Company shares for non-potable use. And then the final recommendation was for the town to reevaluate its water rates on a regular basis. So the next slide explains a few of the things that the town has done since that 2020 update to the Water Resources Master Plan. First, the town did in 2022 increase its water dedication fee to $25,000 per SFE. This is the amount that the town collects in revenue for each new tap that's coming online, each new house, if you will, or any other type of use. So that was updated to increase it to the $25,000 per SFE value. The town also engaged in additional water resources planning. Ken's team just finished a water and wastewater master plan late last year. And then Andrew and his team are working on, very close to completing right now, a non-potable system master plan, which will help drive the future planning and decisions around that system as well. The town also undertook a number of improvements to the water treatment plant, which have a number of benefits, but one of the primary benefits from my perspective, being more the high-level water resources person, is that it allows the town to much more effectively utilize the stored water in Berthoud Reservoir and to sort of optimize the delivery of water from the northern system and from the town pipeline essentially from Carter Lake, compared with deliveries from Berthoud Reservoir. So it's been a great boon to the town's ability to optimize its deliveries of water from those various sources. And then related to that, the town also increased its capacity to deliver water through the Carter Lake pipeline from Carter Lake into town. That pipeline capacity, Ken, you might have to correct me, I think it was around 5 or lower before.
It wasn't quite 5.
Yeah, and so what has now been increased to 7 CFS. The next phase is planned to increase that capacity up to 10 CFS, which 10 CFS is the maximum capacity that the town has a right to in the northern owned and operated part of the system. So that's effectively the sort of maximum foreseeable capacity for delivery from Carter Lake and through that part of the town system. The town is also working on changing some of its native water rights to municipal use. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the town is undergoing a process with the Handy Ditch Company right now. We need their approval before we can file an application in water court to change these shares to municipal use. So we're going through that process right now. As Will and others know, that has been a lengthy process negotiating with the ditch company, but we are very hopeful now that we'll be able to file in water court by next year. And if I do my job well, I hope it will be early next year. With respect to the town's Ryan Gulch shares, we're very close to completing a change case for those shares right now. We have a few parties left that we're still negotiating with, but that's slightly less time constrained because right now we've actually engaged in a good agreement with the Handy Ditch Company where they take that water into their system as they have done historically, I might add, and they're able to use it for their shareholders, and then they give the town a like amount of water from Welch Reservoir that can be delivered to the town's water treatment plant and used by the town. So we have a pretty good thing going with Handy on that agreement right now, and that's a 5-year agreement, and we're about to complete year 2 of that agreement, so that will continue for some time. But we'll nonetheless finish up the water court process, and then that water will be available for direct use in the town's municipal potable water system. The other things going on are the town will continue to look at additional water rights acquisitions. The shares and types of water rights you see listed here are the sort of primary acquisitions that the town has engaged in the last few years. As I mentioned before, the Osborne Kaywood and Boulder Larimer were the most recent acquisitions, but the town will continue to look for potential acquisitions of Handy Ditch shares and also Loveland Lake Ditch shares for the non-potable irrigation system. So looking to the future now with respect to projects, number 1 on the list here is the town's Windy Gap unit and moving forward with firming and reuse of those units. The ability to firm the supply from those units in particular is the most immediate step that will provide a substantial chunk of new water that can be made available to new growth and development within the town. And again, these are units that the town already owns. It's just the town cannot yet count on that as what we call a firm supply of water, which means, even if you have 3 drought years in a row, you're still going to count on a certain volume of water being provided from that supply. So until we achieve a firming option for the Windy Gap units, the town can't, at least it would not be my recommendation that the town would issue commitments for water service based on that water resource because it's not yet a firm supply. So we are working on projects to firm those units, and then related to that is the ability to reuse those units. The reuse is really the second component where you're able to maximize the efficient use of those water resources and really get the most bang for your buck out of the yield of those units. The other projects we're working on are the Wilson Ranch or Turion project. Some of you probably recall that this is a large project along the I-25 corridor to the east of town here. And so it's envisioned that that project would involve a new source of water from the South Platte River. To put it in the broadest kind of regional terms, the town is running up against the big picture yield of the Big Thompson River and Little Thompson River sources that could be converted to municipal use. And so for a big project like Turion, that would be a substantial new commitment of water resources. It's anticipated that the South Platte River would likely be the source for that project. And that would require additional water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities as well, just due to the new source coming into the system, and then again, just the magnitude of the development overall. As I mentioned, the town will also continue to acquire additional water sources, both CBT and Windy Gap units, depending on the price, right? These are 2 of the most valuable water sources in this area, and so price is definitely a factor, but we will keep our eye on the market for those types of units. And then also, as I mentioned, both Loveland Lake shares and Handy Ditch shares are also 2 sources of native water that are readily acceptable and deliverable into the town system for different types of use that can be valuable for additional water resources in the future. The town will also continue developing the non-potable system pursuant to the master plan that Andrew's team is working on completing right now. And then we'll also continue to evaluate alternative transfer mechanisms. These are potential water sharing agreements with farmers that have certain time constraints associated with them, but that could result in, you know, a reliable, firm water supply for the town in the future as well. So a few conclusions here. Berthoud remains in a good position with its water resources. That's really something you'll hear more about from Andrew here in a minute when he goes over the snapshot. But we have continued to acquire water rights and improve facilities which increase the yield of your existing water rights and really maximize the yield of those water rights and the reliability of those water rights. As I mentioned, the Windy Gap firming and reuse is the most substantial next step that will really provide a significant chunk of water for new growth and development within the town. The town does currently have significant funds for the development of water rights, these water rights projects and new facilities associated with those projects, as well as water rights acquisitions. And the next few years will really be critical to developing infrastructure to provide a reliable water supply and really help the future security of the town's water supply for future growth. That Andrew can speak more to this in terms of the snapshot, but you know, it again speaks to the importance of firming up the town's Windy Gap units so that you can count on that water supply as the town continues to grow in the coming years. So that's a lot that I went through really quick.
Very good.
Don't know if I went through quickly enough, but happy to take any questions you guys might have.
Certainly. Just to remind the trustees, this is its own language here, and that was a huge overview. And I found Pete to be a wealth of information. I think some of these might be better addressed maybe on a separate conversation, just given that this is we've got other things on the agenda tonight. But still want to open it up for any big questions. Let's start with Trustee Ayers.
This comes up all the time with citizen questions and concerns about our water portfolio. Is it too early, or could you ballpark the number of basically taps that would be available with the two litigations that are ongoing and possibly the Windy Gap firming?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give you those numbers off my head, but Andrew, in the scenarios he runs through in his snapshot, he'll run through the differences between like no water from Windy Gap or sort of maximum water and then a mid-range scenario. So he'll speak to some of those numbers, also including the continuing growth in commitments and taps as the town develops.
Okay. I guess a technical question is reuse a new thing or newer, or has that always been part of the water process?
It's newer. I mean, again, it gets to the age of the different communities along the Front Range, right? A lot of communities have had pretty robust reuse systems and reusable water rights for many, many decades now. But I think just as the Front Range continues to grow and develop, we're just realizing the importance of, you know, maximizing the efficiency of use so that we're not just taking a ton of water out of the system, but then using it one time and then, you know, sending it to Kansas or Nebraska, right? So it's just a matter of being more efficient with the resources that we have.
Are there any, final question, there's obviously benefits ecologically, et cetera, for reusing. Are there any governmental benefits for being able to reuse?
Yeah, I mean, just dollars, right? It's just water rights themselves are one of the most expensive capital investments that any community needs to make. And so the more you can, you know, again, promote or provide more water just based on investments you've already made in existing water rights, just allows you to, you know, provide for that much more growth and development with your core set of water resources without having to go back out on the open market and acquire really expensive capital assets.
Does it have any effect on, I know I said that last one was my last question, but now I have a follow-up question. Does it have any effect on, I guess, so Berthoud's level is here, does it have any effect on the higher tier of governmental agencies or governmental, I don't know how to really ask this question, but does it look better from the higher powers, I guess, to have more reused water, and does that benefit us in that regard?
Well, in Colorado, you know, when you talk about higher and lower powers, you talk about higher elevations where the water is coming from, and I think about west slope users versus east slope users, and certainly there's pressure by the west slope to make sure that before any more water is coming from the west slope over to the Front Range, we're really maximizing the efficiency of our use with those resources that we're already draining from the west slope. And that's a critical component in all of those negotiations between west slope users, east slope users, conservation and environmental groups, you know, and other people that might be opposed to big new projects to bring more water from the west slope.
Thank you.
Sure.
Trustee Wing.
Yeah, I'm glad Mayor Kovac said, you know, we could ask a lot of questions. That was a great presentation. That was awesome. I mean, we could be here for many nights, I think, talking about all the details. So I'll just keep it to a couple high level. So I'm trying to envision in my mind, you mentioned these 5 ditch companies and then multiple other sources. And at some point, does it all come into one pipe and there's some meter on there that says, hey, you're at 10 shares now? I mean, how does it literally physically work to feed in, that then goes obviously out to all the neighborhoods and all the tributaries? So
Sure. Yeah, and the answer is different based on which particular ditch company you're talking about, right? And you can guarantee every single one of them is keeping a very close eye on what shareholder is getting exactly what amount and in what time, right? But broadly speaking, the way it works for the town is your main supply source is the Carter Lake pipeline, right, coming in, which goes directly to the water treatment plant. Then you also have Welch Reservoir, which that pipeline runs basically right next to Welch Reservoir.
I saw on your map 2 water treatment ones. At least I thought I did. Is one near the Berthoud Reservoir?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a holding tank for us, if you will, where the pipeline from Carter goes into that. Is that accurate?
It actually goes directly to the plant, and then you have the ability to fill the reservoir from that pipeline, but also take water from the reservoir into the plant separate from the pipeline. So
Okay.
it's a way to kind of maximize, you know, the flexibility of those deliveries. And then you have Welch Reservoir, which is a large reservoir owned and operated by a Handy Ditch Company. So that's a major supply source for some of the potable water that ends up going to the water treatment plant, but then also non-potable irrigation water that's used throughout the town. And then you have the Loveland Lake, which is just to the southwest of there, but, you know, more or less in the middle of town, north end of town. That's a significant source for the town's non-potable irrigation system. So that's run through a series of ditches and pipelines to different developments throughout the town where that can be used just without treatment, right, for just irrigation use.
So things are metered, obviously, which makes sense. It's liquid gold, right?
Yeah.
And then kind of a follow-up question. So our waste treatment center, so I assume that's sewage coming from our sewage systems, and it's treated, and then is that like consumable, potable water that goes back, or what happens to that water?
No, that
I'm
water.
assuming that's the reuse, but maybe it's not.
Well, but the town doesn't have a reuse system yet, so that water right now is discharged to the Little Thompson River and goes downstream.
To the south, to the Platte, right?
And also, you know, the large majority of the town's water rights and water resources portfolio is not reusable, which does present a challenge in how you optimize the delivery of reusable water into that system so that you can maximize your reuse of that water too. So that's a challenge that we're continuing to, you know, wrestle with as we work on planning and building out a reuse system for the town.
My last question, Fisher. So you talk about buying shares. Well, there's only a finite amount of water. So is it a zero-sum game? If I buy one, he sells one? Or are there extra shares to be bought? And I'm going to tag on to that question. And then along those same lines, you talked about the capacity changing from Carter to 7, and yet we have a maximum of 10. And I'm just wondering, why don't we just go with the 10?
Mhm.
And if we're spending the money to enlarge the capacity, why don't we do that one time?
Yeah, you already do have the right to 10 CFS within the system. It's just that pipeline, for reasons I probably can't tell you because it was prior to my time, but was not designed for that maximum capacity at the time, probably for just dollars and cents reasons, right? Just the overall cost. So it was always contemplated as sort of a phased development of that piece of infrastructure in particular. With respect to the shares and your question about that, the way to think about it is a ditch company has a portfolio of its own water rights that it has, right? And then the shares are its way of allocating the yield of those water rights among its shareholders. So it's up to a company if it wants to, bring more shares into the system or potentially try to acquire new water rights to increase the yield of its existing shares. So that varies quite a bit based on just the particulars of a specific ditch company. But in broad strokes, yeah, it is a zero-sum game that, if Handy Ditch, for example, has 900 shares. And so I don't foresee that they're gonna just issue another 900 shares anytime soon. So a share of Handy Ditch is a certain percentage of the total the yield of the water rights of that system. And then obviously that can vary from year to year just based on weather and hydrological conditions.
But it is a finite volume of water. It doesn't, it's static. It doesn't move, right? I mean, a share is a share.
It does actually move. So every year, most ditch companies, the way they operate is every year in the springtime, based on what they have in their storage reservoirs, what they foresee for weather conditions, and a lot of times what the irrigators are telling them about what they're projecting for their own demands, they set what they call an issue. And so they say, each share in the company this year is worth half an acre foot, right?
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Thanks.
Trustee Kurtz?
One question, great presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
And probably not a fair question for me to ask, it's super detailed, but on the newly acquired water rights, I think you said we have a third of the direct delivery rights in the canal, but in the Ish Reservoir, do you know proportionally about how much in that company? It was the really long one, I think, the manufacturing.
Oh, the 81 shares.
Yeah,
I don't recall the total number. That one is very esoteric and confusing because there's the old shares and then the new shares, and so I honestly don't have those numbers on the top of my head.
Just curious. Yeah.
But it's it's over 250 acre feet of water average yield from the 81 shares that the town purchased. So
Okay.
it's a substantial chunk of water.
Yeah.
That was my question. Cool. Awesome. 250 acre feet?
Yes.
I have a panel coming up in 2 weeks, so I want to look good, so I'm taking notes here. And do you mind sending these slides out to us too?
Sure.
Okay, and I think we'll probably want to follow up like we've done in the past.
Absolutely.
The 201 or
great.
something.
Sure. Yeah, Christian already has them, so.
Oh, thank you.
We can
Okay,
help
if
you
you
out
could send
with
those out. And is it fair to say, so we're in 3 watersheds now? We have the Colorado River, we have the Big Thompson, and the Little Thompson, which I believe is its own watershed. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
On a micro scale, right? I mean, the Little Thompson is a tributary of the Big Thompson.
Okay.
But it is a different watershed. Yeah.
Okay. Other questions? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to ask questions? Okay. Thank you, Attorney Johnson.
Yes, you're
By the
welcome.
way, Attorney Johnson is our water attorney, and so Chris and him work alongside weekly and get a lot done. So thank you for what you do.
Weekly if Chris is lucky.
Sometimes it's daily, or several times a day.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and trustees, for inviting me up here. My name is Andrew Case. I'm a project manager at LRE Water, and I've been doing water resources planning and helping out with water court litigation for the town since about 2017. Thanks, Pete, for going through that 101 presentation. You'll all be ready for the quiz at the end of my presentation. So as Pete mentioned, we've been working on what we call a water snapshot. He's already gone over the water resources master plan that we prepared in 2020, as well as the non-potable water master plan that we're currently in the home stretch on now. This was a more short-term outlook that we first prepared about 1.5 years ago We were calling it a 5-year plan at the time. But as we were in the process of preparing it and we were getting feedback from the town, it was clear it needed to be updated on a more frequent basis to allow the town to make informed decisions about water policy and cash and lieu sales as the town continues to grow. And so we are updating this every 6 months. We just finished our last update in September of this year. And on that 6-month time frame, we're getting the most recent data from the town about what your customers are using from their water treatment plant. That's broken out by tap category, so we can see, what all of the, it's aggregated together, but what all of the town's residential customers are using, and basically boil that down into what an average residential tap is using in the town, which is useful for this analysis. We also use that as an opportunity to add any additional water supplies the town has added to its water portfolio. So any CBT units that have been picked up, the Windy Gap units that were acquired in the last few years, any other water supplies, which would help further the town's ability to serve those projected demands. And then what also became clear as we were preparing this is that we needed to have a good handle on what we call unrealized water demand, which is, the data that we receive from the town is what's coming out of the water treatment plant and being used by your customers. But Berthoud has sold a number of water taps to potential development that is in the process of being developed. So permits have been issued, houses are being constructed, but they're not occupied and they're not yet exerting a demand on your water treatment plant. And so we have estimated the amount of water that could be put into that category that's not being captured in the use data yet, but will be in the coming years. So here, we've prepared, it's a pretty simple spreadsheet model to basically simulate one dry year in Berthoud's system and your ability to serve that, and also have the potential ability to serve a subsequent dry year. We don't want the town to exhaust all of its water supplies to get through one drought year, because we've had situations historically and likely will again with back-to-back drought years. Some of these numbers may look familiar. Pete just went over a lot of these supplies. This is what we've plugged into our model for Berthoud's use in a dry year. But you'll see some of the numbers are less than what he provided, because he was talking about the average yield. As he said, sometimes those yields vary in a dry year. That seniority system that he was talking about means that the most senior water rights tend to have a reliable yield they can achieve every year. So the Decree water is a good example of that. But Handy and Ryan Gulch, and in particular the Windy Gap units, will fluctuate year to year based on the runoff season, how much rain we're getting, and what the demands are in each of those systems. Something else to note is here we're showing less yield under the Handy Ditch and Ryan Gulch water rights that the town has purchased. That's only because, as Pete mentioned, that water is currently being reserved for irrigation use, primarily at the Heron Lakes development and the TPC Colorado golf course. And so we removed it from our analysis because we're looking strictly at water available for treatment and distribution to customers. As additional shares are acquired, they'll be added to this table. And you'll see as we go through the scenarios, it'll increase the available supplies the town has to use. The main thing to note about this table is the variable yield of Windy Gap, the firming and reuse that Pete was talking about. And it's really the only supply here that's going to vary significantly year to year. We've modeled 3 different scenarios for this. Scenario 1, which is kind of a worst case scenario, and it's included mainly to demonstrate why it's our recommendation that firming and reuse be a priority for the town, and you'll see why a little bit later. But that assumes that there is no reliable yield for Windy Gap. So if you could think about in a wet year, you might get all of your Windy Gap allocation, which for Berthoud's 10 units is 1,000 acre-feet. You might potentially get more than that. Without the ability to store it, you don't have the demand to use it. The next year, if it's a dry year, you might get 0, you might get 100 acre-feet total. It's going to be something substantially less. We plan for the driest years, because in every year, even the driest years, you need to be able to serve your residents without having to resort to emergency short-term solutions like water rationing and leasing extra CBT shares and potentially drawing down Berthoud Reservoir more than you would like. So the second scenario assumes more of an average Windy Gap yield, which you could accomplish on a reliable basis with some firming and reuse. That's the green column there, and then the red column would be with full firming of the Windy Gap units. This figure is just the town's annual treated water demand over the last decade and change. And it shows, obviously, the growth in the town over that period. It is also a good illustration of that variability in year-to-year water use. You see the big dip in 2023. Even though 2023, as the town's been growing, was the highest amount of taps you were serving to that point. The wet spring we had last year, all the rain that happened in April, May, June of last year just meant that there wasn't nearly as much outdoor irrigation demand. And so that number went way down. We expect once we get the final data from 2024 that it's going to bounce back up and possibly exceed that 2022 value and keep trending upward. So this concept of unrealized water demand, as I discussed, is trying to estimate what's currently in process but not yet actually exacting a real treated water demand at your plant. That unrealized demand is converted to actual demand in the coming years. It's going to be completely dependent on the speed of development, how fast they're building homes that they've purchased water for, and folks are moving in and actually using water. We've been working closely with Berthoud over the last couple of years to track those water certificates as they're issued, they're purchased and then issued to lots. And the current estimate of that unrealized water demand is about 640 acre-feet. And that's stayed pretty consistent the last couple of times that we've updated this. So the I guess four scenarios if you include current day that we've modeled here. So currently, if you add in the unrealized amount, Berthoud has essentially committed to 8,778 SFEs, those single-family equivalents. And that includes uses that it's not just homes, it's also commercial and schools and multifamily, but each of those are essentially converted into an SFE so we can use one standardized unit to talk about this. If you look at scenario one, which again, I don't think is a realistic projection of where Berthoud is headed, but it's more a demonstration of why Windy Gap firming and reuse is such a priority, would indicate that when all of the current unrealized demand becomes realized, water is going to be kind of tight in 5 or 6 years. But what we're relying on is that scenario two, the average Windy Gap yield, which Berthoud is currently pursuing with the firming and reuse projects. It's looking into adds about 2,000 additional SFEs to the portfolio, and then the full firming scenario three adds an additional 1,000 on top of that by our estimates. This doesn't include any potential water development in the South Platte River. Those discussions are still pretty early on in the process, so we're not including that in what is essentially a 5-year plan, but to the extent those projects become realized, they'll be incorporated as well. This graph is just a nice demonstration under that scenario two, kind of the average Windy Gap scenario of in each month of the year where Berthoud's treated water demands, where the water's coming from. So starting in November, which is the beginning of our water administration year, and also the beginning of Northern Water's CBT year, you'll see that the town's demands will probably be met entirely with Windy Gap water supplies. That, not to get too far into the weeds, but helps most leverage the reuse capability of that water if it's used in the winter. But then starting in March, CBT starts to be incorporated into the system until decree water can be used in April. Decree water is the bulk of the supply from May through October, but is supplemented with those changed Handy Ditch and Ryan Gulch water rights, as well as some water released from Berthoud Reservoir. So that's what a typical dry year operation could look like. And then this figure, it kind of depicts that unrealized demand concept and our projection of Berthoud's rate of growth of water demands over time. And that projection is based on the water resource, the water and wastewater master plan completed last year did some fairly comprehensive population projections that we've relied on to essentially extend water demand over the next 10 years. And the 3 horizontal lines here represent each of those 3 water scenarios. The bottom blue line being scenario 1 with no firm windy gap, the middle line being the average scenario, and the top line being that fully firmed scenario. So where the solid black line crosses the particular scenario line indicates when your actual demand reaches that point. And then the dashed line includes that unrealized demand as well. So that helps for planning purposes to keep track of that. As Berthoud continues to add water supplies, it wasn't in this update, but in the previous update, it was an additional 50 CBT units that the town picked up. That pushes each of these lines a few acre feet further up and extends the time at which Berthoud can.
The colored line, not the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So our conclusions, similar, we're on the same page as Pete. We think Berthoud is in a great place with respect to its water portfolio. You've been able to sell water taps consistently for the last few years, and we don't recommend that stop anytime soon. The firming projects that we're pursuing for Windy Gap further expands by 2,000 SFEs the town's ability to reliably serve those homes in a dry year without over-exercising Berthoud Reservoir, having to rely on short-term supplies. And then any development of South Platte supplies then further extends the ability of Berthoud to serve those customers. The updates to this analysis that we're doing, that we're planning to do every 6 months, will allow us to keep track of that on a more consistent basis, because at the rate that development is happening in the Front Range, you can sell a lot of taps in 6 months. So we're going to keep a close eye on that and make sure the town has all the information it needs to make informed decisions about water policy. Any questions?
Mr. Case, that was extraordinary. Thank you. Thank you for the, I know Pete, the town asked for having more of the snapshot, so thank you for producing this. This answers some of my questions just seeing those visuals.
Excellent.
I'll go down the line. You ready?
A great segue to the other presentation, very good.
Thank you.
Is McNeil Reservoir also Welch Reservoir? Is it just like a different name?
Neil, I haven't heard that name.
That's the,
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, it's they're the same.
so just a question, from the high water mark of McNeil/Welch, it's down about 100 feet right now from the high water mark. Not 100 feet this way, 100 feet of shoreline.
Mhm.
And I walk around Berthoud Reservoir frequently, it doesn't look like it's down at all.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's a simple answer, one gets a lot more uses, but what's going on there that the Berthoud one, we just don't need that extra
Yeah,
reserve to pull on?
In an average year, and most years are average or typical years, we got a decent runoff season this year. The CBT quota was an average quota. You shouldn't need to use much in Berthoud Reservoir except to cover outages of the bureau system that Pete was talking about. The reservoir is really there to supplement in dry years, when the CBT quota is low or the windy gap yield is down, and you might need to draw down Berthoud Reservoir extensively. But that's by design. We'd like to preserve the reservoir as an amenity for the town. And if you're drawing it down significantly every year as part of your standard operations, that really cuts into its function for that purpose.
And it looks like around there's a construction project going on of about a 4-foot pipe in there. Is that a feed to the town around Berthoud Reservoir?
A 4-foot diameter pipe?
There's it's been there for months and months. There's construction taped off.
Oh.
And it's these massive, huge pipes.
Oh, yeah, that's a vault, and actually that's a project that I'll talk about here in just a second.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
Just a
Oh, I'm
quick-
sorry. Yeah, cutting off the whole other side. Go ahead.
Sorry, just a quick question. So
Yeah.
I just wanted a reminder for myself, from you guys or staff, on what, obviously the Windy Gap firming is what's gonna keep us going forward with our developments. So what's the scope and timeframe on projects for firming I just want to see that we're syncing up our timing with the demand and the project on that.
Yeah, we had done some exploration, so big picture wise, the firming, the first use storage can occur either in that new Chimney Hollow Reservoir, which Berthoud is at least not currently a participant, or also Dry Creek Reservoir, which is hydraulically connected to Carter Lake. The reuse piece is a little more open-ended, in which you were talking a little bit about reuse earlier. Functionally, what that's probably going to look like is the water will still go into the Little Thompson River, and at some point downstream, Berthoud will be able to divert a like amount from the Little Thompson River and store it, and that's how the water is reused. So it's not strictly directly taking treated wastewater out of your effluent pipe and then using it immediately. You can get some dilution in the river, although Ken might tell you sometimes the water the wastewater plant is putting back in the river is of higher quality than the Little Thompson, but
All the time it is.
all the time, there you go. And so we looked a couple of years ago, did some pretty extensive analyses and investigations into potential well field in that location and potential storage, because that's really what's needed to leverage the reuse water. You need a place to store the reuse, and then you need a well to pump that you then augment with the reuse water. That's how you generate more water to treat from that type of operation. But the bottom line was it was gonna be too expensive for the yield that we would get on the Little Thompson. It's just not conducive in that area to high yield well fields, and storage is also extremely expensive. And so we've started to move further down towards the South Platte for evaluation of those projects, but it's still
So
ongoing.
storage is really one of the major components, but we don't have any kind of time frame on something like that.
It's part of the South Platte projects that we're currently exploring. Storage is never cheap, but the cheapest storage you can get is usually associated with gravel mining operations, where aggregate mining companies come in and excavate a big hole in the ground that then they have no use for once they've extracted all the material. And so there's a natural kind of win-win scenario where municipalities can come in and line and basically turn it into a reservoir. That makes it more economically feasible. Little Thompson just doesn't have much gravel to do that with, but down on the Platte, there's a lot more.
So it seems like to follow on with that, there's like kind of like a 2024, but it seems like 2030, we're gonna have to start, I mean, it's gonna get real tight.
It needs to be implemented, yeah. Some manner of firming and reuse should be
Should be
implemented by
implemented.
then.
And I know we're working towards all those things. Those are already.
So we have several different options underway, and maybe Ken or Pete can address those in a little more specificity, but we're looking at existing storage, we're looking at storage that's already under construction that we already have some potential use in, and then we've also, as Andrew talked about, looked at the possibility of diverting water out of alluvial wells adjacent to Little Thompson into a new reservoir that we would have to construct. The most likely of those scenarios is that we will use an existing reservoir for storage under some kind of agreement or partnership with another jurisdiction, which we have some opportunities for, and then, or South Platte storage down kind of directly east of town, which we would then pump back into town for suitable supply. So, outside of, we know what that timeline looks like. It's something we talk about all the time, and average windy gap yield is very consistent, or has been generally consistent. I don't know that we've ever had a 0 years since I've been here. But we need to plan for that. We need to make sure that we have the water supply available to us. So we know that there's that kind of 5-year time frame, and we feel confident that we'll have a solution for a pretty solid chunk of water, even if it's not the entire reuse potential within that time frame.
I
And
appreciate the
that's a good
creative
point, is the whole
strategy.
amount does not need to be implemented
Yeah.
in 5 years. That's just when we start projecting, you're gonna need some of it, and that demand is gonna continue to grow.
Sure. Well, and this presentation really is helpful for us to see visually the demand that's coming versus the current demand. So thank you for illustrating that clearly for us.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad it was helpful.
Can we get those slides too? Is clerk have them
It's the
already?
same
All right, cool.
presentation.
Same thing. Oh,
So
great.
we've got 'em all.
I had a quick question.
Great presentation. And I can't remember if you mentioned this, but what was the growth rate? So on your kind of chart at the end with the different demand versus supply scenario lines, what was the SFE growth rate per year that was assumed? It was pretty conservative. I mean, I think it was, and which is a good thing.
It's,
We want
it's,
it to be
it's been, it's slightly less than what it actually has been in the last 5 years.
Okay.
But what your growth rate in the last 5 years actually has been is probably not sustainable.
Sure, sure.
And projecting that out any further than another couple of years
Okay,
makes the graph go like this.
so maybe somewhere
so it's something
between what we're
less-
seeing now and the peak we saw
Yeah,
2
and that
or
was
3 years ago.
part of the analysis that Tetra Tech did for their water and wastewater plan
Okay.
last year was a pretty comprehensive analysis of population projections.
Okay.
So yeah, we relied right on what they put
Gotcha.
together.
Okay, so you're consistent across the other planning efforts. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
And from a growth perspective, in order to have really kind of meteoric growth like we've had in the last 6 years, market conditions would have to be just right, and we'd need to have a couple of very large developments come online that are not currently, that may be in the pipeline but are not currently under construction. And in order for those to do, like Turion is a good example, they will have to bring water. That South Platte supply or some other supply will have to be in place, or we won't have sufficient water supplies to serve another 5,000 customers out on the east end of town. There's an enormous amount of infrastructure development that has to occur out there. And that's part of what they're waiting on. I mean, they have, that project has had an improved PUD for 20 years.
Are they waiting on us, or could they bring the supply?
They are working with us to acquire the supply, so
Okay.
it's kind of a joint effort.
Yeah.
And I think we have kind of the terms of that deal structured. There's 1,000 steps to get to the end.
Yeah,
And we're on step 100, and so.
Yeah.
But, again, I think what we have currently under development and what we have kind of in the immediate future pipeline, we have more than enough water supply to support those, especially as Windy Gap firming gets established. And you have to remember some of the really big projects. Think about a project like Ludlow Farms, and you see, potentially 1,600 new housing units. That's a 20-year build out, right? So that's not all going to hit in the next 5 years. And it would be, we'd have to have a major change in the economy to even get close to doing that faster. So, it's important to remember that kind of housing velocity right now is probably in about the 250 houses a year range, kind of on the high average end. That super high end where we were at 530 or 550 houses a year, we don't expect to see that, and it's certainly not on a consistent basis, over the next decade.
Just one more, I guess, detailed question. The uncommitted demand portion, does that include, I guess, developments like Ludlow that isn't fully through the approval process but has like a neighborhood master plan approved? Or is it only for those developments that are, signed, sealed, developers are free to start moving dirt whenever?
I was gonna say, it only includes developments that have purchased water from the town.
Okay, so
that commitment
further
has been
along
made.
in the process.
So we have developments that have brought water. So we do have some developers that have brought water to the town, and when they do, we issue them a credit that they can then draw down as building permits are pulled. Or they can purchase cash in lieu from us.
Yeah.
They can do that on a permit by permit basis, or they can buy for whatever final platted lots they have. So in a development like, Heron Lakes, for instance, they're only final platting typically 100 or maybe 120 lots at a time. They can come in and purchase the water for those 120, but not for the entire project. So while they're, Ludlow Farm, even if there was 1,600 units, potential in that neighborhood master plan, their first phase is likely to be in the 200 range.
Yeah.
They could come in and buy water for 200, but not for the whole thing. So until that lot legally exists, we won't sell cash in lieu.
But they're not in that like stepwise jump because they're not even at that step.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, if they haven't purchased that water, then they don't count in that unrealized water demand. So that is the water that we've sold that's on the books, but where the project hasn't actually been built yet.
Gotcha. But it's all integrated, so we'll obviously keep looking at this as we approve those.
That's correct, yep.
Yeah.
Just one more quick question.
Yeah, go ahead. Trustee Wing.
I think in, if I'm not mistaken, in southwestern Nebraska, there was aquifer, Ogallala aquifer ran under there. Do we have anything like that?
In portions of Colorado, Absolutely. And there are many jurisdictions that have relied on what we call non-tributary groundwater, which is the deep, non-renewable aquifers. But that is ultimately the issue with those aquifers, is any sustained pumping for a town of your size, it's gonna draw it down, and you're gonna see lower yields over time, higher pumping costs, and ultimately, they're gonna be drained of their useful life. So most entities that historically relied heavily on those types of sources have diversified with more native, reusable, sustainable water. And then that way the deep well water can be used for drought protection and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
But I'm not a groundwater guy. I don't think, do we have non-tributary aquifers in this part of the state?
I don't think come quite this far north, right? I mean,
I don't think so.
Not the ones you're thinking.
Yeah, I haven't seen
really deep
evidence of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Sparse.
Yeah, most of the ones that do exist in Colorado are struggling to maintain the current amounts being pumped from them.
None of them are like nearly as large as the Ogallala.
Yeah.
That is a massive freshwater aquifer.
Soon to be was, right? That's gonna go out
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah.
Okay.
Eventually, yeah.
Do you have a date when the Lake Superior pipeline is coming to Colorado, by any chance?
We work on
I do
it.
not.
Ken's working on it, right?
Yeah.
Poke a hole into the Mississippi.
Turns out water's
Yeah,
pretty
that's
heavy.
right.
That's a lot of money to pump it up.
Trustee Hughes.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys can answer this, but I have a science question. Do you know what, this is not a get me question, I don't know, right? What percentage of native water is lost in the process of cleaning and spreading it out through all of our different carriage systems?
So in terms of what percentage is lost?
Yeah, so there's 100 gallons of water here. When it
Mhm.
shoots out of our factory, when it shoots out of our plant, how much is left?
So there's an assessment from the Bureau to carry the water from Carter Lake down the pipeline, 3% is left on the table right away. And then based on looking at your use data over the last 10, 15 years, it's about 6% is lost in the treatment and distribution process. So the difference between what comes out of the treatment plant and the total amount being used by your customers.
Thank you.
And that water doesn't get physically lost, like it doesn't disappear.
Right.
We
Yeah.
don't account for it because it either leaks or it goes into meters that, or into systems that are unmetered or whatever. It's unaccounted for water typically, but it doesn't just like, it doesn't vaporize, of course, but.
Yeah, yeah.
Any questions from the public? All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Case.
Thank you all.
Finally, Director Matthews.
So let me introduce Savannah again. This is Savannah Dumler. Savannah is better part of 10 years in the water pump and pretty much all of it in the water business. A little bit of oil and gas, a touch, yeah, a weak moment. And the rest of it in the water bit, either on the public sector side, she worked for a large water and sanitation district in South Denver, or on the consulting engineering side. We're very fortunate to have her on board. I'm pleased as punch. Give her a big hug here, but that wouldn't be appropriate. What we're gonna do is, we've been talking about all this paper water and all this stuff. We're gonna make it a lot more real, and these guys could talk about their briefs and all that kind of stuff. But this is what we're doing as far as building the infrastructure that we're gonna need to make all this happen. There's a lot of things that are going on. We haven't really listed absolutely everything that we're doing. These are some of the key ones and hit some of the key features. And so we're just gonna kind of go through them one at a time. And also these are projects that we're consumed with, we're focused on, some of which are being funded from our fund, 21, 22, 23, 24, and some of these are funded by developments. The first of which is a good example of that.
Okay, so this is for Campion Lift Station. This is one that's coming out of our capital fund. because it's just an old lift station. It's not quite up to capacity. We've had a lot of operational issues with it. It just needs to be upgraded. So we're going through right now, working with consultants to get a design in place to upgrade the electrical system, get new pumps in there and get a better capacity.
That's right. This sanitary sewer lift station was part of the Old South Loveland Sanitation District that the town took on. I'm not sure when that was, 20-plus years ago, I think. There's a sister lift station to that off further to the west called Bomar Sanitary Sewer Lift Station, and that will be upgraded right on the heels of this one. It also is in pretty poor disrepair. The next one is so we talked a lot about, or Pete and Andrew talked a lot about the Carter Lake pipeline and the criticality of that, the capacity of that. So one of the things that I realized when I came on board is we didn't have a clue as to what this pipeline could do or what kind of condition it was in. So we took a look we potholed it all up and down the area where we had big question marks to see what kind of condition it was in. While we were doing that, we installed corrosion protection devices to it because a lot of the failures that we've been receiving were corrosion type failures. Through that, over the length of that, over this project, we installed about 13 of those corrosion protection setups. Some of those were brand new standalone. The pipe had never had any kind of corrosion protection on it at all. As you got further west, closer to Carter Lake, that was a little more robust system. However, it was exhausted. And so we basically charged it back up again. And I can go in the details of what that entailed if you'd like. There's some peripheral devices called air release valves. We worked on a couple of those throughout that. The biggest components are the big 5-foot diameter pipe that you saw. That actually is a vault. It's as the pipeline winds down into town and runs along the south side of Berthoud Reservoir, there are two spots where it can divert water into Berthoud Reservoir, one on the west side and then one on the east side of that bifurcation dam. Both of those are being rebuilt in order to pressurize that pipeline so that we can achieve these capacities that Pete was talking about. Like we were saying prior, we'd be doing good to get 5 CFS out of it. This year, we were able to run 7 out of it with these improvements. We got 2 more, these 2 vaults that I was talking about. That'll increase it even more. And actually, we can run 10.2 CFS through the existing pipe. We did the hydraulics, that'll work. We've never done that. We don't, the other component that'll need to happen in order for that to happen is we need to make a connection to another one of the northern facilities, the Southern Water Supply 2 pipeline, and then that'll provide the capacity for us to receive our remaining 3 CFS and change. That will require a metering facility and some work with Northern Water and stuff like that, and that'll be a few years down the road. We don't right now need that much throughput. I think that's about it for that one. Oh yeah, I had a picture of it.
Can I ask a quick question on that one?
You bet.
Can you remind me what was the current CFS we were getting from that pipeline versus what we're trying to accomplish?
So before, we were doing good to get 5. We weren't able to get quite 5 CFS. It would start running out of the pipe at County Road 21, I believe. There was an old gooseneck coming out of the ground. If we tried to put too much water, it would just start pouring out of that gooseneck, and then we'd start losing it. And now we can do 7.
Okay, I want to applaud a little bit. This has been a long long ongoing project.
You heard
that-
this once or
Yeah,
twice.
this wouldn't have happened without you, so thank
Wow.
you. This is gonna increase our ability to take water and
Yes.
be more efficient, so.
Yeah,
excited.
and that gooseneck is like right about here. Yeah, and then most of the corrosion protection took place and along this area in between, Welch Reservoir and Lone Tree. It's real wet, as you can imagine, and, you know, most of that pipe was iron pipe and just, going unchecked from a corrosion standpoint.
So that pipe, part of pipeline is not a straight shot. It kind of winds around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, does a lot of winding.
So the other project we're working on, you're gonna see a lot of lift stations in here. As we're growing and developing, we're putting, quite a few new homes on this. We're needing to move the wastewater around. So, another upgrade we're doing is to the existing Heron Lakes lift station. And this is bringing up the capacity from 490 to 620 gallons per minute. This is a developer-funded project as they're going in and building out Heron Lakes. They're also gonna be doing this. So we're currently working, getting the site application ready, reviewing the designs to make sure it's, you know, gonna work for us and it's, you know, gonna meet what we need it to meet and operate the way we need it to operate. So, that one's currently in review with us, actually. We just got it today.
Is this the trouble one?
It is. Yeah, it is. And my other question is, you say developer, but ultimately, the Metro District funds it at the end of the day, doesn't it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe this, particular lift station was discharging raw sewage into.
Yeah, so part of this
That's right.
upgrade will, actually be putting in some emergency storage, overflow storage.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, prevent that from happening again. Yeah. So then, part of that, a large portion of that, the required upgrade of the Heron Lakes is to facilitate this one. This will be called the Marina Lift Station. It serves, you've probably seen Heron Lakes 17th filing come through. Portion of that will flow into this Marina Lift Station, which will then pump to the collection system that drains to the existing Heron Lakes Lift Station. This is a brand-new lift station. And it primarily, it'll serve a portion of 17th and then this new Marina neighborhood. And it's 216 gallons per minute as a comparison. As you can see here, here's this tankage that Savannah, that'll be similar in nature to what we're gonna be building on Heron Lakes. Make sure that gets in there when this is constructed first to take care of emergency type. You know, it's a mechanical piece of equipment, it's gonna fail, so you just need to make sure you got proper tools in place when it does.
Is this on the west side of Lone Tree?
Like the old boat dock?
No,
It's on the
it's
north side.
north side, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pretty close to that maintenance facility on the, kind of the other side of the
Yep,
homes and real close to the, yeah.
not too far from that 80 acres that's been
Oh, this is that crane annexation.
Saboteur.
Yeah, so the, I guess it was called the crane annexation, but it's the one that, the 17th filing is immediately east of the maintenance building.
Right.
It's kind of a long north-south piece that ties into the existing development down in the south.
Yep.
And this lift station is west of that development.
Yeah, here's the, right here, this is the ditch coming out of, the main ditch coming out of Lone Tree Reservoir. So another thing that you probably heard lots of is the town's plight with selenium that's making its way into our collection system, and then we are insufficiently treating it. We are treating it, and actually at a higher rate, but still are not able to treat it enough to meet our permit limits. We traced that back in 2021 to the Prairie Star neighborhood that had some major flaws and defects in the collection system. And we've been working with the developer since then to repair those, and we're still working on that. The latest on that is, kind of the first round of repairs were identified and made, and all those were made. Regrettably, some of those are still leaking water. I mean, that kind of demonstrates just how wet that area is, and this was a kind of a dry summer, and it was still actively leaking. But we also found evidence of another over 20 manholes that were now leaking. And so we did a study earlier this year, brought in a specialist, a consultant that specializes in this infiltration and inflow control to study the area. I don't know if one of the things that we did was we did smoke testing, blowing smoke into the collection system pipe in order to look for leaks. And then every manhole was inspected rigorously and came out of it with another round of rehabilitation recommendations, which we're gearing up now to get started. We'll be starting those in the fourth quarter of this year. So that's kind of where we're at. Oh, the other thing that we're doing in the system is, so the initial study in 21 where we went up into the system and took samples and actually tracked the problem to Prairie Star, we're duplicating that effort right now. We've taken samples, we're waiting for the test data to come back, but that will tell us, A, has the problem migrated? Is it a similar nature to what it was back in 21? Have we reduced it in areas? Give us the ability to kind of test the effectiveness of the work we've done thus far, and then shift gears if we need to. So we're waiting on that. And then the second half of that is, we know we're not gonna get it all out. It's gonna make its way to the wastewater plant. And so then what are we doing once it gets down close to the river?
Okay, so
And
the
if I-
next, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just clarify, because that, sometimes this, I don't know, maybe you guys all understood everything Ken just said.
100%.
But in its simplest terms, when we talk about leaks, it's leaks actually into the sewage collection system, right? It's not leaks out of the collection system. There's high levels of selenium existing naturally in the groundwater, and it's infiltrating into our sewage collection system, and then that groundwater makes its way to the plant and has levels of selenium that are too high for us to be able to treat and still maintain our discharge permit requirements. And so trying to identify all those points of infiltration, but like in some of those manholes where it's leaking between some grouted joints in a manhole, it's like coming through like a water hose. The hydraulic pressure from that groundwater is really making its way into the system, and so it's kind of like, maybe this is just how I see it, but it's a little bit like the boy at the dike, like trying to plug the holes with his finger, and you plug
We are
one,
chasing
another one
it
pops open, and then he plugs that one, another one pops open, and so anyway, just.
But you can't actually see where the holes are because they're all underground. so
That's
it's-
right. And so it makes it very challenging to find the holes, so.
Who's at the Prairie Star, who's paying for that one? Is that the developer?
The developer has paid for everything to do.
Yeah, I was gonna just ask similar, are they cooperating and participating well with the town in trying to make these repairs in a timely manner?
Thus far, and let me correct myself. They paid for all the construction. They haven't paid for, my time and then this consultant, this specialist, the town hired that firm to come in and do this additional survey. So that's kind of where we're at.
And we feel like that's a reasonable and appropriate scenario. The town, prior town staff, prior town contractors inspected some of this work. And so where there are flaws in workmanship, which we believe there are, those are difficult to identify even during the inspection process. And so some of those manifest themselves later. But we also believe that there's a lot of value in us working together towards a solution, because the sooner we can get it fixed, the better we all are. And if we start fighting legally, that's not gonna get us down the road. And so the developer has been very cooperative. Their contractors and even subsequent subcontractors who maybe even weren't directly involved in some of the initial issues, are working hard to solve the problem. So we have a good thing going. Hopefully it stays that way as we kind of work through all of those remaining
I believe
outstanding issues.
technically, if those are public infrastructure, which I think they are, ultimately it falls on the cost of the residents via the bonds for the metro districts.
In some ways, so in most cases, I think that work is being done by the contractors or subcontractors who did it
Okay.
at their expense.
Okay,
There
Great.
are expenses that the developer is covering directly. Ultimately, it is currently the town's infrastructure. We own it. We're responsible for it. The Metro District may have paid for portions of it or all of it to be installed,
but now the
but it
town
is the
maintains
town's
it.
infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
It's our problem to solve, and we need the developer's participation to do that at the most cost-efficient way.
Great.
And that's what we have currently.
So the next step that we're looking at with selenium, because even if we do get this fixed with Prairie Star, there's still gonna be selenium in our system. I&I is always gonna happen. It's gonna rain, water's gonna get into the sewage pipes, whether it's from manholes or, leaks. So one of the things we're looking at is what is actually the selenium limits in the Little Thompson River, because that is the water that we ultimately discharge to. And trying to determine if we have an appropriate discharge limit. If it's naturally higher in the stream, us discharging a higher limit shouldn't be an issue, but it's proving that. So one of the things we're looking at right now is fish tissue samples, and just what that picture is of. I believe I have no scientific background to actually tell you if that is a sample of a fish or not, but that is what Google gave me when I looked it up. So we're going out. We did spring sampling, and we got a very sporadic data set. Spring is when spawning's happening. That's going to change the levels in the fish tissue and the ovary samples, which is the primary thing they look at, because that's what selenium actually affects in fish. So we're doing a fall sampling as well. Those have been out and collected. We're just waiting for the test results on that. And hopefully that gives us, it takes that kind of sporadic data set and kind of will refine it in, so then we could possibly go back and say to the state, this is what the natural selenium limits are in Little Thompson River, and if we could get our limits adjusted.
Can I ask another question? What's the impacts to humans for selenium, high levels of selenium in the water?
Well, so it's the only place that it's exhibiting itself in our system is at the discharge in the Little Thompson River. So human contact in the Little Thompson River is minimal. But to my knowledge, there's no, extreme adverse impacts from selenium at these parts per.
To clarify, it's not in drinking or household.
Oh, absolutely not. It's discharge coming out of our wastewater treatment plant only.
Because it's not coming from our water system, it's coming from the ground directly into our sewer system.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to say out loud, because I think that's the concern people hear when they hear
Yeah, okay.
that this is getting into our system, is that they think this is something they're ingesting.
Yeah, great.
No, and even the samples that we've taken of fish, we haven't seen any adverse, because that's why they look at the ovaries. It's birth defects in fish. They're not seeing any abnormalities at this time in the Little Thompson River. And that is from fish ingesting the water, not just swimming in the water. So I don't think there's much risk of like skin contact of selenium or anything like that.
Sure.
And this is micrograms per liter that you measure selenium in, so it's a very small amount.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I've on numerous occasions talked about advanced metering infrastructure. Right now we have AMR, the kind of the predecessor to it. We have that in our system. We have trucks that can drive around and read meters. The next stage is it's all stationary, and the meters at all of our residences and businesses and everything would be read continuously, and that's AMI. And so I budgeted to deploy an AMI project next year. We're working hard to get ourselves ready for some grant funding for that. Several communities have been successful in that. We're hoping we're one of those. We tried a couple of years ago for grant funding and didn't get it, and so we're gonna try it again this year. What we're doing here is we're doing a pilot study with one specific brand of meter that we would possibly deploy in an AMI project. And the special thing about this meter is it claims to have the ability for every meter to have acoustic leak detection capabilities. To where that meter can be listening 24/7, 365 to see if leaks are developing, so on and so forth. So we've deployed about 100 of those throughout the system. They're running side by side with our existing census meters and collecting the data, and then we're gonna assess that, and we are collecting the data now and are assessing it, and then that'll help us as we make a decision on what brand of meter we want to move forward with. There we go. One of the new regulations that came out a couple of years ago, and the first deadline came to fruition last month, was the revised lead and copper rule. And in that rule, every community had to put together a service line inventory of every single service in their town. We combined forces with a consulting firm called WSP. Actually, this firm came to us via a grant that we received from the state of Colorado, and they helped us put together our inventory. We made the deadline in September. It had to be done before October, and there's still plenty of work to do, but basically what we did is we developed a database, and we defined all of our known service line materials. And we still have a few hundred that are unknown that we're gonna have to go in and continue to try to figure out, possibly with some potholing in front yards and stuff like that. And then that'll be the next deadline. But this first deadline was met, and yeah, wasn't even really that hard.
Excuse me, you said what the material was coming from Carter into town. What was that again, the big pipe?
On the big pipe coming from Carter, it's a series of materials. Most of it is ductile iron pipe. And there is some steel pipe in that, and that's some of the pipe that we have some of the most problems with corrosion. And then the newest sections going through Hammond and then going along, going through the Hammond subdivision and going along the south side of Berthoud Reservoir's PVC.
And that's what they're using, PVC?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So the next big project is the wastewater upgrades, which are phase 1, or I didn't name these. Don't blame me on this. Phase 1AA and phase 1A. That is Ken's fault. I'm gonna stick to that. That's why it's called that way. Been working on this for months and I still confuse which one's which too.
It's genius. Come on.
So the point of this project is to improve nutrient removal at the plants. There is a regulation 31 coming out that's gonna be really strict nutrient removal requirements. But there are what are called BIP credits, which are, never remember what voluntary incentive program credits. So that is going in and reducing our nutrient limits right now, lower than what the current requirement is. And that's kind of giving us credit in the future that we don't quite have to meet that stringent requirement at the timeline it comes out. It's kind of buying us some good faith with the state and giving us a time extension to actually meet Reg 31 when it comes out. Okay, so phase 1AA comes first. which in my head should come second,
Yeah.
but thank you, I'm not the only one, so that drives me crazy. So this is a temporary nutrient removal that we're gonna set up at the plant. This is something we could do really quick by installing some baffles and putting some mixers in to start reducing right now pretty quickly. So we start getting those credits, hopefully get some additional selenium removal in there as well. And that's what's kind of driving us to do this temporary improvement while the bigger project is getting done, which is at phase 1A. And that'll be the permanent setup within anoxic zone. I have a little description of why we have an anoxic zone, if anyone is not an expert in this. But, so we're gonna put an anaerobic zone in there, which means no oxygen, which when there's no oxygen, the bugs in there, the little microbes are starved. They can't breathe, so what they do is they reach for phosphorus, is their next closest source to oxygen. And so they consume up all of the phosphorus, or as much as they can. And then you put them in, and that's where the mixers are gonna come up. There's gonna be a low oxygen zone. So now they're starting to be able to breathe a little, so they don't quite need the phosphorus, but they're gonna reach for the nitrogen as like we're gonna supplement the oxygen with the nitrogen, and then, you know, then it goes into the normal bubbler zone. Like, am I saying that completely weird?
That's good.
That's good.
Brett's over here laughing. If someone's really familiar with the process, that's a very weird way of describing it. But that's how I picture it, is actually hungry bugs.
That's great.
You just sound brilliant, because I have no idea.
Yeah.
So, good job.
Sounds a little cruel, but at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is,
drink
it is a
our
real
water.
good. Starve them to make them eat what we wanna eat, yes.
That's right.
So that's gonna be the end goal, is to put that anoxic zone to meet the phosphorus removal, to get those credits. And so this will be all into next year. We're just now getting a design builder on board to start the phase 1A design. We already starting to look at phase 1AA, getting quotes, getting that ready to deploy right now. Yeah, that's where we're at with this.
Okay. So, just north of the Berthoud Reservoir, I don't know if you've noticed over the last couple of years, there's been kind of a mess. A lot of standing water. There's been some odors from that. The water will go stagnant. That's indicative of a couple of problems that we have up there. One, the subdivisions that were designed up there were designed for the water to be caught and for it to soak into the ground. It did that okay for the first few years, and then it stopped doing that. Now it fills up with water, and the water goes nowhere. So that needs to be solved in order for us to have a viable stormwater management system. Second issue is when a lot of that development occurred up there, the stormwater was constructed and it was plumbed into the Berthoud Reservoir. That works from a stormwater management standpoint, but now we have nutrients, roadway grime, and petroleum products and stuff running into our water supply, which is not what I want. And so this project is looking at how can we catch all that water and discharge it properly in a gravity pipe, no pumps or anything like that, and discharge it off to the south and east. We have a solution that we've come up with, and at this point is kind of a concept design. There's several parties that we're gonna have to play nice with. This pond right by the highway is owned by CDOT, so we need to work with them on how to resolve this problem. And then downstream from there, it'll go downstream along the east side of Berthoud Reservoir, underneath the railroad tracks, and then ultimately off to the east to Sunny Slope Reservoir, if you can picture where that's at. That will be the ultimate disposition of all this stormwater.
Isn't there a ditch running that exact route?
There, it kind of bits and pieces of it. The Handy ditch kind of more or less runs that route. If Handy would say, yeah, just connect your storm sewer into our ditch, and then you can divert it out of it there, or let us take it all the way to the river. yeah, that would solve our problem.
Okay.
They're not gonna allow
I
it.
thought there was a small pipeline by the wastewater treatment plant that goes underneath the track, but I think I got it.
There is a storm
is? Okay.
sewer. There's 2 or 3 storm sewer crossings underneath the track. And there are some, small, laterals off of Handy that run right along there.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. So this has no selenium opportunity either, right?
I
Nothing
think
groundwater leaching
it'll,
back up.
I think we haven't quantified this, but my theory is this will generally lower the chronic groundwater in that area, and hopefully it will decrease, the salinity infiltration that we're receiving in the collection system.
Take some of the pressure off the pipes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys have heard about this. This is the Bacon Lake Interceptor Project. This is a water and sewer line to go along Bacon Lake and connect down into Farmstead. You know, one of the big driving factors of this is to also alleviate the First Street trunk sewer, which has undergone some repairs and definitely over capacity. And we're hoping, you know, working with the developer to get a portion of it built and then building this portion to eventually serve future developments to the north. And we're currently working on getting the easements to put these pipelines in, which I know you guys have seen. And so far, so good on this. Still just working through easements and working on getting drawings done.
Can I ask how that's going? Just quickly, how are the easement conversations going?
It depends on who we're talking to. There's some,
Are we making progress? I
we
guess, is
are
the
making
question.
progress. There's some personalities out there. And Savannah has done a very good job getting to know and love all of them. You know, actually, the two that we were most concerned with was this, you know, it's the property owner that is very knowledgeable, and he's really studies up and he's plugged in. And then over here on this side, they're kind of the bookends. This is Mike Cook, and he's the old director of Little Thompson Water District. Anyway, great guy, good community leader. We've gotten both those guys to sign. They've signed their easements, and then we've had a series as we're working in from there of signatures, and then are working to kind of close the deal on the remaining. And you know, I'd say I'd like to think that we should have all of these all executed before the end of the year.
Do these lot owners monetize their easement? Is that how that works?
No, we're purchasing real property,
Okay.
with that. So
Okay.
approximately, 50% of the value of the property is how it's valuated.
That the easement goes across,
Mhm.
so a portion, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Great job. That's incredible progress.
Yeah,
That
it's,
was a tough one.
it has, that's consumed so much of Savannah's time, and it's tough because it's not engineering, it's more, a people thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of relationship building. Good
Yeah,
job.
it is for sure. So this is kind of the last one, and this isn't a huge capital project, but it kind of demonstrates one of the areas that we are struggling to get on top of, and that's, you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, this 30-inch pipe over here and this big pipe over here. We can't forget about the existing infrastructure in Berthoud itself and its state of really disrepair. The example that I'm providing here is kind of one of our first proactive. We're really gonna go out and we see a problem and it's a difficult one, and we're gonna jump on it and fix it. This is a valve right there by the old ball fields that was constantly leaking, and we were constantly afraid it was just gonna cut loose and just start, you know, flooding the ball fields. And the likelihood of that occurring in the winter was high, and so we jumped on that this fall to get that done. It was tricky. We could not isolate this valve. We couldn't isolate it, meaning we couldn't shut it off so it could be dry and the contractor can get in there and work on it. So we just kept going out block by block by block by block until we finally shut things down
And just to clarify, we were attempting to, like, we were shutting down valves to isolate, but
Yeah.
those valves weren't holding, so we were having to go further out, and those valves
Yeah.
weren't holding, and then further out.
And, yeah, they're leaking or they were tied into another line that wasn't attached to this, so it was a big learning process. We finally were able to basically isolate this. Better part of 100 homes, were either very low pressure or were out of water for a few hours last Friday. Did get the valve, replaced, that was successful, and we learned a lot in the process. And the 2025 budget, there'll be a capital project for this times like 30. And it'll be a well thought out plan for approximately a mile of high need water distribution system in the town that we have issues with the pipes, but mostly we have issues with the valves. And then we're gonna put a project together and then put that out for bid and then hopefully do that work next summer. Is that, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's what we,
Yeah, that's all we had. Thank you guys, this was a lot to go through.
Wow, yeah, all you had, that's a lot, that's great, no, that's good.
So thank you for being patient and going through that, and if you guys have any questions.
Good. It was what you just mentioned. So is there a mapped network of all the valves and what you could shut off throughout the whole entire town?
Yeah, the hard part about that is, so we do have our field maps or our GIS system that shows all the lines, all the valves. But that is built off of as-built or, drawings that we have, and some of them conflict with each other. If this is what one developer shows in this area, but the overlap here shows a completely different thing. That it's kind of our best guess, and it's a lot of it, it's going out there and looking and trying to find the valve box, assuming it hasn't been paved over, which does happen significantly. And so
Should we budget for that, to do that study and confirm all of that?
yeah, we are, and there is, I think when I started, we had about $6,000-7,000 a year in GIS. I don't remember the exact number, but I think I budgeted 30,000 for licensing for GIS and special surveys and exploratory work and stuff such as that to build that mapping system. So yes, that needs, and it's a continuous process.
Yeah, because the hard part is even when we go out and we see the valve in the ground, we think it's matching this map, but then we shut it down and come to find out it's teed in slightly different in a different location. But we can't find out why it's teed in a different
So
location.
if
and
we,
it's just-
if we had a massive break somewhere, who would handle that? Who would have that information to literally stop the emergency?
So we've had some serious breaks and we struggle with, we need to shut the water off from this break. And there's a process, and it's us, it's me, it's my crews. And you just start at the problem and you start working your way out. About 4 months after I came on board, we had one of those. A contractor hit an 18-inch asbestos cement line, and that was tied directly to the water tank. We knew it was a problem. And then the water plant called us and said, "What's going on? Our tank is half empty and falling." And so, but we were able to over the course of hour and a half find where the problem is. We end up having to put a lot of homes, either with very low pressure or no pressure, and then we mobilized a contractor to repair it. It was a big line, and then there's some local contractors we have agreements with that can move and do 24/7 response for us.
Awesome.
And, yeah.
Any questions? Awesome, thank you guys, there's a lot more going on. Savannah, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, great to have you. Okay, we skipped over the Long Lake water rights purchase, so I'll just
We
move
did.
back. What?
We did.
Yeah, so I'll just move back and and hit
He's
on
been
that.
waiting patiently.
He has left, the opportunity left by now? Yeah. I'll turn it over to Administrator Kirk.
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'll go ahead and turn it over to, back to Pete Johnson, our water attorney. This is a unique and somewhat complicated potential water acquisition, so.
Pete, you could have gone home. You kept it here.
That's
Walk you
okay.
through some of those.
Happy to stick around. So as Chris mentioned, this is a pretty unique potential water acquisition. It's associated with a reservoir up in the Estes Park area, actually now in the national park. And the dam for this particular reservoir failed in 1982, caused some pretty substantial damage up in that area, including actually the deaths of 3 people. As a result of that catastrophic failure, there were lawsuits involved, as you can imagine, and the parties that were entitled to damages as a result of that lawsuit actually ended up owning the water right associated with the reservoir. So for many, many years, they looked for, someone that would be willing to take on the water right and basically monetize it in a way that was useful to the end user, in a way that could then, compensate these parties for the damages that they had incurred in more than just water rights that can't actually hold water anymore. So a group associated with some developers that Chris and the rest of us here at the town are familiar with came to Berthoud, and basically they purchased this water right and proposed conveying it to the town, but only dependent on the town's conversion of the water right through a water court process to the town's end use. And one of the other really important aspects of the deal is that the town would work with the current owner to find a place where the water right could be stored, and that would be acceptable to the town. So that's the nuts and bolts of the deal are that this water right would be conveyed to the town would enter into a water court process. All of those costs would be paid by the seller of the water right, so the town would incur no cost. And then at the end of the water court process, whatever volume is decreed by the water court for the town's end use, including the town's ability to store this water in a storage reservoir or reservoirs that are acceptable to the town, and the town has sole discretion in determining what storage would be acceptable. Then the volume that the water court says that the water right is entitled to based on the outcome of that water court proceeding, the town would then convey to the owners, the current owners, a water certificate entitling them to water credits for the town's water service in an amount that's commensurate with the amount that was awarded by the water court. So it's a way to take a water right that hasn't been used for decades, see what we can get out of the water court process. That cost is, very low risk and no cost to the town. All those costs will be covered by the seller. And then the town would, instead of conveying money for the water that it gets out of the deal, it would convey credits that then can be used for development within the town. Similar to like what Andrew was describing, how, developers can pay cash in lieu for final plat of developments within the town. A similar type of structure there where the town issues a certificate for water credits. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. It's a unique and complicated deal, but very low risk to the town and really no cost to the town. All of the legal costs associated with the water court process will be covered by the current owner of the water right. The way this works, just to get a little bit more into the weeds, is the town would actually receive a deed for the water right and would actually own the water right, which is kind of necessary for the water court process because we have to claim the town's own uses of that water right. So the town needs to be the owner and the one applying for the change of the water right in water court. But the way the seller has assurance that, the town will follow through with its end of the bargain is the seller would have a lien on the water right until the water court case is completed. Then when the water court case is completed, that lien is released in exchange for the town providing the certificate for the water credits. So that's this sort of final consummation of the deal. So that's a pretty complicated transaction in, 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, please.
Yeah.
So would the end, I guess the end goal for the seller would be they could either develop in town or they could sell their certificate to a developer and make cash in that regard?
That's right. Yeah, the credits, that's a good point, that the credits would be transferable for developments within town.
Okay.
Trustee Wing?
Yeah, so what body of water did you say this is coming from Estes to get down here?
So that's part of the water court process, is we'll determine where the water will be stored and used, but it's basically Big Thompson River water.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
And then, one of the paragraphs here, you state that they'll get one single-family SFE for every 4/10 of an acre foot. What would you estimate the number of SFEs coming out of this deal would be? Hence, they would be able to sell those to developers or themselves, because they are developers,
Right.
in town. I mean, is it worth 50,000 or 500 million? I mean, how many homes can they get out of this?
The absolute maximum would be 1,500 acre feet. I'd have to do some quick math.
759.6 acre feet. And then
It's
use 0.4 of that.
760 acre feet,
So 4.2
but
times
also a
that?
refill right of that same amount. You divide that by 4.
6,000?
So I'll just call it 760 for round numbers. So that'd be 3,800 SFEs.
Times 25,000?
Times 25,000,
My God.
that's correct. Would be
That's-
$95 million. Now,
Exactly.
I will tell you right now, that is not the amount that will come out of the water court process for a water right that has no current place of storage and has not been used for 30
And
plus
this
years.
breach of this dam happened how long ago?
In 1982.
So 40 years ago? So this developer 40 years ago had the insight to buy the rights to that water.
Well, no, they purchased it just a few years ago. But the claimants that were damaged by the dam failure, there was a long litigation process that they went through with the original ditch company that owned and operated that reservoir, by which they ended up, holding title to the water rights as compensation for the damages they had suffered. And then some years after that, this development group purchased the water right. And I'll just add, the development group's been very candid about what they purchased it for. We know how much they paid for the water right. We know the values, these values that we're exploring here. So we've been very candid with them about the realistic possibility that this water right ends up being worth 5-10% of the total that, these volumes that are represented by the original water decrees. And so we've had candid discussions with them about, are you sure you want to take on the cost of this and, allow the town to move forward with this where you're paying all these costs? And so it's an arm's length transaction. They know what they're getting
The
into.
potential for the storage of water could be a new reservoir that they could potentially fund to build to store this water.
Potentially, I think it's more likely that we would try to find existing reservoirs that could be used for this purpose, just because of the cost.
And what's in it for us?
Ultimately, it would be a new water source for the town that could be used to, continue to serve additional growth and development within the town.
And that water could serve developments that this particular developer is associated with, or other projects in town, depending on how those certificates were ultimately applied. They would have to be used in town, so the certificates we issued couldn't be, they have no value in Loveland, right? So it would be water that would be applied to new development.
This is 760 acre feet, right? Essentially is what we think the amount of the water rights are for that.
With a refill right of the same volume, so potentially double
Okay.
that.
And
But
again,
it's also potential, Pete, correct me if I'm wrong here, but that once you get through the water court process, it can be a tiny fraction of that amount.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Likely will be
No,
some
almost certainly will be
substantial
some fraction,
fraction.
yeah, some substantial fraction of that amount.
and is there an equivalent shares to this, or is that the metric they use, 760 acre feet?
So this was a water right that was originally associated with a company that would have had, shareholders and shares, but that company disbanded as part of this whole lawsuit and the dam failure, so that company no longer exists. So this is titled to these water rights themselves, so there wouldn't be shares.
760 acre feet, and then if you could store that somewhere, then you have the use of it. Is that, in
That's right.
layman's terms, is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Very interesting. I'm reading, seems like it was a Loveland Reservoir that way back in the day, created in 1902 by Loveland for their own farmers.
Yeah.
Now it's ours.
Well, yeah.
Potentially.
Long Lake Reservoir.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Other
Long-
questions for Attorney John? Go ahead.
I had a few, outside of just, this is very fascinating from a water rights perspective. I don't think there's any precedent, but I think that's maybe my first question is, are we the first community to attempt to run this through the water court process?
Yeah, I mean, this is very unique.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is the reason we, structured it in a way that minimizes, basically absolves the town of any risk that the transaction, there's a possibility that the water court determines this is an abandoned water right, and it's absolute zero, yeah.
Yeah, that's, and so we're really, really only on the hook from a risk perspective of, say, staff time, your time, just kind of, monitoring the process, but there's no other monetary expenditure until water court.
That's right.
provides
And
that.
other than, keeping Chris and Ken and all of you involved as the process goes along, hopefully it would be mostly my legal time, which will bill to these owners, and then, engineering time that likely will be done by Andrew's firm as well.
Yeah, so, relatively.
And again, those direct expenses from Branch and Reich, which is Pete's firm, and LRE, assuming they're the ones to do the work, which we would expect that to be the case. They'll send us an invoice and then we send that on to the developer.
Okay, gotcha. And the developer, it's not even like really relevant to it, but the developer was we're working with, is the first transaction from the folks who were initially injured in the tragedy, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll see there's a provision in here about, the town's obligations under this agreement are limited to this contract and the parties to this contract, and an express, absolution of any liability or any obligations to any of those prior claimants, yeah. And the developer did, buy these water rights free and clear of any of those types of obligations too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see what water court decides, but yeah, certainly unique. I don't have any further questions.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Trustee Wayne.
How many homes did you say? You estimated the number of homes?
The maximum would be 3,800.
So,
That's if you got the full volume for
So-
both the right and the refill.
so we get the rights, we then give them the rights to 35 or 3,800 homes. At the end of the day, what's our net water we get out of this if we're giving back 3,800 SFEs?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that the town now has a source that can be provided to those commitments that you're making.
Okay,
It's like a voucher for water, and it has to be used in the town of Berthoud
but essentially we're giving it back to them.
for future water use. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's how all these water transactions work. So if a developer dedicates water to the town, we issue them certificates that have an equivalent value to what they dedicated, that they can then apply to new development in the town. Alternatively, we would buy it, we would pay for it in cash and not give them anything. This is a way for us to acquire the water for our portfolio with no cash outlaid from the town. And ultimately, the new water we buy is gonna be applied to development anyway, right? And that's why we're buying additional water. And so, it eliminates all the risk for us for going through the water court process, and it requires no cash out of pocket for the town to acquire title to the water and to maintain title to the water. We simply allow it to be applied to development through that developer, who can then transfer those rights to other projects in town, if they're so inclined.
Do you expect a large amount of objectors in this court case? I mean, it's just so
Yes.
kind of wild. Okay.
Just because of the, the neighborhood it's in, right? The
Yeah,
vicinity.
yeah.
I mean, all of the major water users on the Big Thompson and
Yeah.
likely others will be objectors in the water court case, yeah.
Why did it go to a Boulder? I'm trying to understand, it's a Big Thompson thing, but it said it went to the Boulder Water Court?
Yeah, I don't honestly, I'd have to look back at the captions, but that could be right, just because of the, jurisdiction of the court at the time. Yeah, it wouldn't, a lawsuit like that wouldn't necessarily be a water court matter, because it's like a, criminal or personal, injury type civil lawsuit.
Okay.
So the jurisdiction would be a
I
little
see.
different,
Okay.
yeah.
Other questions? I think it's creative. I'm glad we're giving it a shot. I mean, it doesn't seem any downside. I'm glad you structured it this way.
Yeah, it's really no risk to the town, so.
Hopefully Loveland
potentially-
really doesn't come out against this, but they always seem to, so.
Well, it will be an interesting negotiation.
All right.
That's
Great.
what you pay me for.
I'd like to
in
watch
this
for
case,
some
they pay.
popcorn, but I'm invited. Cool.
So at the end of the day, the town would still get the $25,000 tap fee for those 3,800 homes, right?
No.
Or we're giving that tap fee to the developer?
That fee is normally, so they would typically come in and pay us $25,000. We would issue them a certificate. Instead of paying us $25,000, they're actually giving us water. That's a better deal for us. When they pay us $25,000 per SFE, we have to go out and acquire water. Actually, what we're typically doing is selling water we already own, but we gotta go and buy the next chunk of water for the next guy.
But I'm talking about the end user. If this developer sells the water to other developers, he would recoup the $25,000 tap fee, not the town. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. That's where his value is,
Yeah.
right? So his value is, I don't have to pay the town $25,000 per SFE when I come in and build homes, or I can sell these certificates to builders,
Got it.
and that's how he makes his money back.
Yep.
All right, if there's not anything else, we have one, I think, real audience member, Amy, if you have any questions regarding this. All right, our town librarian approves. Does anyone like to move on this?
I will. I'll move to approve the contract to buy and sell water for the Lawn Lake water rights and the associated escrow agreement, and authorize the town administrator to take the actions necessary to complete the acquisition.
Is there a second?
Well, second.
All right, trustee Ayers has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Is there any final discussion? All right, clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Wing,
Is there something between yes and no?
That's what that final discussion was, if you wanted to make an amendment.
Besides that, it's yes or no?
Yeah, you could recuse yourself, but there's probably not a reason why.
I was just gonna say, I'm actually going to recuse myself out of abundance of caution.
Okay.
Um,
Working for
I
Northern
should have
Water.
probably done that earlier, I just didn't realize the full nature of this.
I'd say that's not necessary, but it's totally right, so, okay. Trustee Wing, do you want to bring up something?
No.
Okay. Sure.
I think it's irrelevant, but it's Huron Lakes developers.
Yeah.
They probably, some LLC, I don't know that it's part of Huron Lakes, but obviously not.
Yeah, and for
It's something else.
clarity, this is not Heron Lakes.
Right.
This is not the developer of the Heron Lakes project.
Really?
It's a separate company. So
Separate company. Yeah.
there's crossover between principals in those companies, but it is not the same, and this is not going to be applied. There's no expectation that this will be applied to Heron Lakes
Right.
only or to Heron Lakes at all. So there's an ownership group at Heron Lakes, and this is a member of that ownership
Right.
group who's formed a separate company, completely independent of the Heron Lakes development.
Yes.
I think you're fine. If you'd like to recuse yourself, that's also
I
fine.
don't know what position I would have to recuse myself. It kind of have to reason.
I don't see a reason. That's why, I mean, you live in Heron Lakes, but that doesn't mean you need to recuse yourself because other people live in
Yeah.
Heron Lakes.
And again, for clarity, this is not associated with Heron Lakes at all.
I think.
No, I clearly understand that. I'll stick with my yes.
Okay, so you want to remain in, right?
Yep.
Okay, we haven't done a vote yet, right?
He was, I think I was the
Oh,
first.
you were the first
vote.
one, I'm
He was
sorry.
the first
Okay,
roll call.
so you said yes?
I did.
Okay, let's go back. Thank you for bringing that up.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
trustee Kurtz,
Abstain.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right. It has been approved. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if that was your team that did the other presentations. They were outstanding.
That all falls under Ken and Administrator Kirk, but it's a larger
Great
amount of
job.
contractors, right? And
Ken is our Director of Utilities. Pete serves as our water attorney under contract for Greenwich Reich. Andrew Case is our water engineer through LRE. We've got contractors and consultants that work in a whole variety of capacities in the utilities department, but ultimately it all falls under Ken's bucket, so
Appreciate all the work that went into the presentation.
we are
Yeah,
certainly grateful to
absolutely.
have Ken on our team.
the
He's been
clarity provided by all
a
you is great.
fantastic asset.
Yeah.
Great. All right, we got 15 minutes. Do we want to just extend it to 9:45? Or do you think we can get reports done and a
Yeah.
public hearing? 15?
We also still have number 6.
Did we guys miss something else? Yeah, that's the one I'm talking
Oh, the
about.
public hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll move to extend the meeting to 9:45.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Let's move on now to item number 6. It's the last agenda item. This will be a correction of section 3 and section 6 of chapter 30, and this is a public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Karspeck and trustees. I'll certainly try and keep this under about 90 minutes or so, so sit tight. No, this shouldn't take too much time at all. So before you this evening is an ordinance that amends, really it repeals and replaces a certain portion of sections 3 and 6 of chapter 30 of the Berthoud Municipal Code. And so what this is doing specifically is repealing section 30-3-106 and 30-6-112 regarding special use review and site plans respectively and the requirements thereof. The reason for this ordinance is to make a few corrections in those two specific sections. So as you may recall, over the last year or so, there were a number of different ordinances that made amendments to chapter 30 of the municipal code. In these two sections, there were overlapping changes, and when you go through and apply those really sequentially, it doesn't have the correct result that we're looking for. And so this is really correcting that. In those two sections, this ordinance combines all of those changes and memorializes them into one ordinance so that we can ensure they are reflected in the municipal code correctly, as they should be. So a little bit more background on this. The language in the attachments to this ordinance, it is consistent with the prior 3 ordinances that were passed by the Board of Trustees. Now, those 3 ordinances did go through more than a few public hearings before the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Trustees and were already approved. This is really readopting that language so that it can reflect in the municipal code correctly. In the packet, there is a red line attachment that contains some color coding so you can see what changes were made by each of the individual ordinances. Thank you, Ann Johnson, for preparing that. That definitely makes it easy to see what's going on. And then there is a final Exhibit A that's the final code language for both of the sections that I mentioned on the prior slide. And this agenda item has been noticed as a public hearing. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you. Questions for Clerk Samora?
Just real quick, can you just help me with the terminology, the difference between conditional use review versus use by special review? Since I saw that striked out, the conditional use review versus special review, I just wanted to know what the difference was.
I believe that's just a change in the terminology, and Johnson may be able to more thoroughly explain the nuances
Sure,
of
yeah,
that.
thank you.
So a use by special, Ann Johnson, good evening, everybody. A use by special review, a conditional use permit, a special use permit, they're all the same thing. It's just we wanted to condense it down and just call it a use by special review. The code used to say conditional use permit or special use permit or use by special review, and all of the language was interchangeable, and it was very confusing. So we went with one thing.
Okay, that is helpful because it is confusing.
So effectively, this is another kind of wording cleanup, not a structural change.
Actually, you've already approved these changes, and there was just, because there were 3 changes to 2 sections in the code, as you can see by the color-coded changes, it caused some confusion when they were codifying the changes. And so rather than continuing the confusion, we're just going to repeal and replace in whole what you've already approved. So there's no changes being proposed tonight. It's just clarifying it, so when Christian sends it to the codifying agency, they don't have to think about it.
Excellent. Any other questions for Clerk Samora or Planner Johnson? Director Johnson. All right, thank you. This time I'll open it up to the public. If anyone in the public has any questions, we have no one signed up. Okay, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for deliberation and a vote. We all in favor, supportive of this? All right, would anyone like to move on this?
Sure, I'll move to approve ordinance 1346, an ordinance of the town board of the town of Berthoud, Colorado, repealing and reenacting certain sections of the Berthoud Municipal Code regarding use by special review and site plans and the requirements thereof.
Thank you. Trustee Kurtz has moved on this. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Trustee Wing is seconded. Is there any final discussion? Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Certainly.
Deputy Clerk.
Trustee Wing,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Albrecht,
Yes.
Trustee Kurtz,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. Okay, thank you both.
Thank you.
We're gonna move on to reports. Clerk, do you want to just, since we got you here, either way, do you want to talk about HPAC? And, what's the other one here? Or is that it?
It is just HPAC, so as you may recall, we did have a number of interviews and appointments to the various volunteer committees and commissions at the end of September. We did have, I believe, 1 interview for HPAC and a number of additional applicants, and so we did need to follow up on that and conduct a few additional interviews before making any final appointments on that committee. So we do need to establish an evening that we can finish the remaining interviews and then make a recommendation to the town board for any appointments on the HPAC committee. There is a holiday coming up on the Monday prior to the next board meeting in November. So I thought perhaps we could look at the 4th of November, which is a Monday. Virtual meetings starting at about 6 o'clock as we have in the past.
Monday works for me. The 4th?
Monday the 4th, yes.
I can do that as well.
Okay, perfect. So we will plan on that. I'll work on scheduling with the applicants, and then I'll send the information to Trustee Hardy and Trustee Albrecht ahead of that, and then we'll look at having those appointments occur on the 11th, I believe it is.
How many openings are there?
There are 3 openings, I believe, and I believe we have 4 applicants.
Hey, all right.
So but don't quote me on that. It's past
Oh,
9
that's cool to
o'clock.
have that in. We good?
We're good.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, let's start over for the board here with Trustee Hardy.
Nothing to report.
All right, Trustee Albrecht.
The only thing that I just wanted to bring up is, I just would like us to consider reviewing the comprehensive plan at some point in the upcoming year. I know we've talked about taking a look at it, only for the purpose of seeing how it's impacting our local businesses. Those guidelines and expectations that we are now codifying in our permitting policy. I've heard from so many of our existing business owners of the strenuous efforts they're having to make to update certain things like signs or buildings and the codes and the cost of pulling permits, and to the point where I don't know what we are doing that's making it more difficult for them, and I want to make sure that our existing business owners aren't feeling like they need to leave town because of how strenuous this process has become. Our intent is to create a beautiful Berthoud for everybody and an amazing place to run a business, but I just want to look at it through that lens and be able to invite business owners to that conversation to say, what's it like to update your building? What's it like to update your property here? You know, how is it impacting you? And it's just that I've heard from several now that are existing business owners that are very frustrated. And so I want to be able to have that conversation with them so we can make sure that we're working with them to bring things to what we'd like them to be instead of against them, or make it feel like they feel like we're working against them. That's not to be a negative comment towards staff in any way, because that comes back to us. And that's why I'm saying we need to look at our plan again, because if what we're asking staff to do is causing hardship to our businesses to come into alignment with our ideals, we need to, I think, figure out a way to either modify that, or we need to have a better appeal process where they could come before us and ask for certain nuances that might not fit according to that code. Does any of that make sense? And has anyone else heard feedback like that from our business owners?
Personally haven't, that I know of, but I think I kind of understand where, and it's always good to have a review anyway.
I would love to speak directly to those property owners or business owners. I don't know that I've heard from any directly except for one who I know has had some challenges with some setback issues on a new development they wanted to.
Well, I'm trying to be
build.
discreet, but I'd love to
Oh,
talk
for
with
sure.
you
We don't
and
need to, yeah, please,
direct
outside of
with
the,
you to those, just so that they can feel like they're being heard and we can figure out what the issue is. And if it's us and our policies that we're setting, then I want to be able to fix it here so that you guys can feel like you're not getting, taking the brunt of that, if that makes any sense.
100%. I would love to address some of those outside of the meeting first if we can, because I think, I don't know the specifics of the issues you're describing, but oftentimes, the handful of times I do hear from a local business owner or someone who's trying to develop a property in town, oftentimes it's not the issues with our code requirements, it's issues with how can I say this? It's typically an issue with them not wanting to abide by the code requirements because it doesn't work for them. But they're often very specific issues specific to that property or to that business that wouldn't apply to anybody else in town. And so, in instances,
There's a few.
in instances where they are applicable to all projects, I think we should talk about those. And to the extent that we've heard those, we would bring them to you. I have not heard any of those directly, but I would love to get some feedback from those businesses.
Maybe we could talk through some of those and just what your solution
yeah.
would be. If it's not addressing the comp plan, maybe it's looking at individual properties and how they can appeal.
Yeah, and our code does have a process for variance to our requirements. So, and those are typically when you have a unique one-off situation that doesn't apply to everybody in town, but there's one particular piece of property that may not work for what this business owner wants to do. So we have those processes in place. They take time because they have to go through the Board of Adjustment. You have to apply for a variance. You have to go through a formal process. And there's obviously good reason to do that, right? So that we're not arbitrarily making decisions to waive code requirements. Even ones that we would like to, where we might feel like where it's a totally reasonable request, we still have to go through that process for transparency and fairness.
And at what point does the board hear the testimony or the request of someone who's appealing?
So it depends, but they would formally apply. The planning commission is the board of adjustment. If they made a decision, that could be appealed to the town board, as I understand it. But typically, the planning commission will hear those requests.
If it's a new code like signage, they're grandfathered in though, right? They wouldn't, isn't that right? They don't have to change.
That's true, unless they,
Yeah,
unless
so-
they substantially change their sign. We do have a sign grant program,
You can
so
change it
for
easily.
businesses that don't want to, where our sign requirements are more strenuous or more expensive than they may have been previously, we have a grant process in place to be able to pay for several $1,000s of a new sign.
If they did like a major remodel or something, then they'd have to comply with the new code, but I don't think they have to comply with what they're currently doing.
That is correct, yeah, unless they make a significant change.
Yeah.
There's a couple of instances that there have been changes made to buildings and then they had to go through multiple permitting processes, including the building and then signs and
Mhm.
just the number of different things have put, I think, an undue burden on small business owners
I
that,
think one of these is Josh Jones, at least he's public about it, so he brought that up. Has he met with you guys yet?
I've heard from him kind of, not in a formal way,
Yeah.
but he caught me outside of Hayes one day and
It's formal for
Small
Bertha.
town
let me
vibe.
know how he felt about things. As if you know him, he's apt to do. But, most of those issues we typically work through during the development process. And again, in a lot of cases, you have, in some cases, we're dealing with unpermitted improvements that were either never permitted properly, or were done independent, or that just were not ever permitted, or were not permitted properly. And so when somebody comes in to do a major remodel or a major expansion, we require them to come current with all of our codes. I understand why folks don't want to do that. And that feels heavy-handed, but that is our only opportunity to correct unpermitted and in some cases illegal construction that's occurred. And
Which is
really
like half
in
of
most
Second
cases.
Street, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And so
that
as
is
Second Street
that's a burden.
redevelops,
Yeah.
we will experience this issue. Our only alternative is to allow illegal improvements to remain in place. And
or for them to appeal and say, I
This
don't.
is just a shed, why do I have to? Yeah.
so there are
Right.
ways to
Right.
legally permit those structures that we've walked through in this particular case. We walked through with them and kind of explained what that process looks like. And sometimes there's no way to legally permit the structure they're asking for. I don't think that's the case here, but in any case, I think we can talk through some of those issues. And again, I think these are unique to specific properties and really are probably not comp plan or development code issues. In a lot of cases, they're building code issues. We had a local business that we had a lot of challenges with. They were doing unpermitted improvements to their building, and those are building safety code issues that we had to kind of work through with them. And we worked out a lot of solutions to try and make that as easy as we could on them.
That's non-negotiable though, right? I mean, that could be state law.
So I will say, as staff, we do not waive building safety requirements ever.
Right.
Because there's good reason not to, obviously.
And if there's another, I think if there's another code and if there's a systemic problem with that, we probably as a group should address that and say, if we're not gonna enforce it, we don't believe in it, maybe we shouldn't have it.
And I think things like signs or architecture or site planning, things like setbacks, there are some kind of legal setbacks that are necessary for fire code, and then there are setbacks just for, creating certain kinds of, creating a certain kind of place, right? Larger front yard setbacks change the nature of a streetscape, right? Whereas a building right up on the sidewalk feels very urban. So like setbacks like that are oftentimes discretionary. That's not necessarily a public safety issue. Those are the kinds of things that we could review that could apply to everyone. But there's another business I can think of specifically that I have met with a couple of times who designed a building, their architects designed a building that doesn't fit on the site. And so the response to that is, well, we shouldn't have to make our building smaller to meet the town's required setbacks because it would cost us a lot of money to redesign the project and it may not fit our needs. And I don't mean this to sound callous, but in a lot of cases, that's not the town's issue. that project was zoned, there were clear setbacks in the code. It was designed improperly. We actually have looked for and proposed a lot of alternative solutions and helped to facilitate some of those, all while trying to maintain the requirements of the code. They could ask for a variance, and they were kind of walked through what that process looks like. But sometimes those are very specific to a particular property, right? We don't have a setback problem generally. Those are not issues that we deal with on a daily basis through hundreds of building permit, issuances a year. But they do come up from time to time, specifically with, the intended or the expected development or a uniquely shaped property, or in some cases, you'll have somebody that says, why can't I just spray paint a piece of plywood and stick to my building? And you're anti-business because you won't let me do that as a sign. And if the board wants us to do that, those are discretionary choices you guys can make. And those are the kinds of things I think we could absolutely discuss as needed or appropriate, but.
So let's start with having them forward off to.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear more about it
Josh
specifically,
is
because I don't
knows-
know all the ones you're.
And he should be talking
might
to
be
you. If
reviewing.
he's not, that's on him.
And I think he is. I mean, I know he is, because we've had lots of conversations throughout staff, among staff and with him.
I think I just wanted us to, I have the sense that we're becoming a very difficult place to operate a small business, and it's not impossible. I have the sense that we're going to have a very difficult time going forward with getting any small businesses in Berthoud. And so when I started hearing some different one-off things, I just started seeing a trend that it is becoming very difficult to own and operate a small business here. And so I want us thinking of that and making sure that what we're doing is helping them in any way we can. So that's all my intent is.
Cool. Trustee Kurtz?
No reports?
Okay. Trustee Ayers?
Nothing.
Trustee Wing?
I thought the agenda was great tonight.
Yeah.
I really gotta tell you,
Staff.
how much I appreciate the information that was brought, how informative it was, the, LIDA, if I pronounce that right, and the whole water thing. Again, I thought it was excellent. I kinda have a question, something dawned on me, but it's about something we've already voted on and closed on. Okay, so,
It's your time.
and you may know this. So on this, single-family equivalent for every 0.4 of acre foot, the 0.4 of acre foot comes every year. That's an annual thing. You get your,
That's correct.
do they get their, one SFE every year proportionate to our acre foot?
I'm not,
Do you understand the question?
I think so. That's a planning number. So 0.4 acre feet is a planning number based on an average usage. Some homes or businesses, so a single family equivalent is a single family house, right? And then we use that as a conversion factor for, industrial and commercial development, multifamily development, whatever. But that's kind of our standard base planning number. 0.4 acre feet represents the amount of water that a single family house on average uses annually. We don't provide that much water to those houses.
That's not what they're saying is, we get our 760 acre feet every year, and they're saying out of our acre feet, 0.4 of each one of those acre feet, they get a single family equivalent.
That's correct.
We get our 760 every year. My question is, do they get their 0.4 of an acre foot, so it'd be 0.4, essentially it'd be 350 SFEs. Do they get that every year?
No.
In perpetuity, or do they get it one time? You divide 760 by 0.4, and that's their one-time single-family equivalent.
When we issue a water certificate, that is a one-time event. So
Okay,
if
That
we
answers
issue
my
a water certificate for one single-family equivalent, which represents an average use of 0.4 acre feet, but again, that's our internal planning numbers. In some ways, it's irrelevant to what they're doing. But in order to pull a single-family building permit, if you're gonna build a single house in town, you have to provide a water certificate for 0.4 acre feet, or a cash in lieu payment, which also represents 0.4 acre feet from a planning number standpoint. Or you have to provide us water through some water right in the amount of 0.4 acre feet. That's the only way you can pull a building permit in town for single.
in the way they wrote this, essentially they're saying they get 760 times 0.4, and that's how many SFEs they get.
That's correct.
Yep.
Yep.
And then
So
the next part, my follow-up to that is,
that's the number Pete calculated for you is about 3,750.
exactly.
SFEs.
There's some conservatism built in there, I think.
And then my other point is.
They won't get anywhere near that number when we go through water court. They may get zero. I mean, we may ultimately end up with zero
Yep.
water at the end.
Oh, I just meant our 0.4 number.
There's a lot of conservatism in there because a single-family house doesn't only impact our water at that house location, it also then creates demand on our parks. And as we expand parks, we need water to irrigate those parks. And
They're just
so-
converting, they're converting our acre feet into certificates, which are SFEs, whether it's they do, I mean, they just bought a bunch of land, whether they do, I know it's not the same company, whether they do those buildings, homes themselves, or whether they sell those taps. My second part of that question is, can we control the amount they sell those taps for? Because if there's a shortage
Yep.
and they become a super premium, because I'm hearing the water taps are costing $100,000 in a lot of places right now. You know, can we control that, or is that none of our business? It's out of scope for us?
So
Whatever the market will bear.
the answer to that question is yes, if they agree to that. So it depends on how that deal is ultimately structured. We have issued certificates in the past that had a limit on what they could be sold for.
Okay.
That's very difficult because we are not involved in those transactions. And so once they own that certificate, and I'm nearly 100% confident, I'm 99% confident that the vast majority of the certificates that we've issued in the past are sold for more than what they were purchased for.
I believe that.
You know, our water price on a cash and lieu basis has more than doubled in the last 6 years. So if you bought certificates for a project 5 years ago, you probably bought those at $12,500
Good
per
investment.
SFE, and you're selling them now to a builder at 25,000
Right.
SFE, maybe slightly less because the builder can buy it themselves for 25. So you're not, you know, just the transaction cost alone would make it not worth it for them to buy it at the full price. But I would bet that they're being sold at a higher rate. Now, that's also hard to do because in a lot of cases, those are being sold with the lot. And so that might be a total lot cost that includes a certificate. And so deciding how much of that lot cost is the certificate, again, we're not party to that transaction. We've already guaranteed that if a certificate is presented to the town, that they can pull a building permit. But that's what we've done by issuing that certificate. They can redeem when they come to pull a building permit. Some of those are bought and sold. I'm quite confident, again, we are not party to any of those transactions, so I can't say for 100% certainty, but you'd have to be stupid not to sell them for more than you bought them for if you could. And so, yes, that can be a very strong investment.
In their case, they're not technically buying them, we're giving them to their.
That's correct. What they've already bought the water. They're gonna pay for the court costs to get some decree amount. It may be 7 acre feet, not 760 acre feet. We will issue them an equivalent amount of certificates, and then those will be ultimately redeemed for building permits.
And if we were to enhance the storage to handle that 760 acre feet, they could potentially be in with us on some expenses to potentially do that. That may be never a reality, but we've already we talked about a few times
Part of that
tonight.
deal is that we have to identify and obtain a suitable storage location. And so we would expect some of their participation in that, yeah.
Yep. My other question is not related to this at all. So I think over a year ago, the Planning Commission approved what looked like a really, really nice storage facility on one of our main intersections. Is there any kind of time restraint on when they have to deliver on saying they would build something, or?
I'm not sure I know which storage
The
facility.
storage facility at
Yeah.
Berkeley Parkway and 287, not water storage.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about water storage.
No, that's why I said this, no, I said this
I was like,
isn't
there's no
related
water
at all.
storage plan.
This is,
Everybody's talking about birds, Parkway.
no, this is literally a storage, and I'm just wondering if there's
Yeah.
any kind of,
Yeah, we required some
window,
like some
sunset
public
date
records.
on when they need to start construction.
That CDOT pond, we'll just pump it over and.
No, I think there is some, well, and maybe I shouldn't. Ann, do you want to address that?
Please.
So there's no time restraint.
Their building permit has expired.
That's That's right.
And there are several land use cases that were approved either through site plan or a special use permit or use by special review permit. And they have, gone beyond a year, but unless they're vested, they may or may not expire, and it's something that Alicia and Aaron and I have actually been working on, is cleaning up some old things that were approved, and either they never did a development agreement, they never did the conditions of approval, and so we're just closing some of the land use
I mean,
applications.
there's full neighborhood developments that have been approved a long time ago. that are-
And somebody just owns the land like they do.
And for that one in particular, Chris is right. That one doesn't have an expiration date on the land use approval, but for the building permit, that building permit did expire.
Okay. Thank you.
That's why I had to pause, because it was like, this is kind of a nuanced issue, and then, each development's a little unique in terms of vesting and what phase of the development process they're at.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Good to know. Our deputy clerk got married, and I'm gonna, what's your new last name?
Doble.
All right, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Our deputy clerk,
We
Bill.
have 1 minute left. Do I need to extend
Yes,
it?
please do.
All right, I move to.
Just
I-
talk fast.
Hey, Brett, kick it all
Move
off.
to extend the meeting till 9:55.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I'm gonna go quick. I couldn't make the NPO meeting, I had another engagement, but we did have the new executive director, met with Administrator Cook and I. Very nice guy. We pulled him from the city of Fort Collins, very knowledgeable, and he was a local guy too. So I think he'll take over Suzette's shoes and do a lot of good. I did a tour of biochar yesterday. I was asked on Friday, so I said yes, but didn't really have much time to turn around. Awesome is right next to Ursa Major. I would love try and get it scheduled for that. They're doing a big expansion. They are international now, but I just learned about the carbon credits for carbon capture credits that you can sell, and they are 80% of those are junk that are being sold around the world. And biochar is one of very few that have been certified as clean, as in they can track the whole process of where the carbon is being stored and whatnot. So they just they received a huge grant. So I'd love to get out and kind of, I want to learn more myself, but I mean, they're involved in water treatment in municipalities for algae. And they can show that they can pull the algae out, and then they take that bag and then add it with chicken feed or something, and they resell it as fertilizer. So it's amazing what they can do. So I'd love to, I'll send some pictures, but love to get a tour for everyone else on that. I did the opening of the Mobility Hub. This was for all mobility hubs, Firestone, Berthoud, and Loveland at Centerra. Today it was at Loveland. I was not asked to speak, which was interesting, just Mayor Pro Tem of Loveland. But theirs is beautiful. It is fantastic. I don't know if you guys have toured ours, but it's a stark 180 to what we have as far as art and design out there. McWhinney's pumped in a lot of money to that project, and if you walk through Loveland's, it's awesome. They can color it different colors for Broncos games. So hopefully one day we'll get there. I think we definitely need to put something in the budget, Administrator Kirk, just to do something out there at ours so it doesn't look like a dark hallway that no one's going to want to enter.
Could you explain what it is you're referring to?
The mobility hubs, I'm sorry, are for the Mustang. It's the center load lane underneath I-25. So the Mustang, the CDOT's coach bus can actually park in the middle of the I-25 and we can walk underneath. So this has been unofficially open for a while today, and they're now officially open.
Are they still free, or is that over?
I think they're still free. They didn't mention they're going to charge, but
It's
maybe,
just Berthoud that's free.
yeah, maybe they didn't mention that for a reason. So maybe they are going to charge.
The new stations, I believe, are all intended to be free for 2 months.
Okay.
So
After-
ours should be coming up on, you have to pay in the next couple of weeks, because ours has been technically operational for, I say ours, but the one here in Berthoud, not our station, but.
A month.
Yeah.
It's been operational for about a month.
Since we don't have Turion right now, and McWhinney's did help them, I was just trying to think in my head of ways we can try and dice it up so it doesn't look. I mean, you and I have talked last week about how appalling.
And
it
Turion
can
did
get.
commit a pretty substantial amount of money to help get that fully constructed, because
Yep, they
originally
did.
they were gonna build some of the basic infrastructure, but they weren't gonna actually put an operational station. So Turion did help to make that a reality. And one of your strategic goals, the board, if you'll recall, is 3 public art projects. One of the ones ones that's on our short list is murals in the tunnel, or some other art installation in those tunnels and maybe at the entrances to those, to spruce those up, so.
Great, so that'll be something we're having in the budget for next year.
That's the expectation.
Sorry for being a little slow. When we say tunnel, are we just talking about the area that goes under I-25?
It's a dome pedestrian tunnel, so where our underpass is on 56, this is to the north about, I don't know, 1,000 feet.
You know where the parking lot is?
A little less.
Yeah, I do.
There's the tunnel that goes under the
Oh, okay.
interstate.
Pedestrian tunnel, yeah.
Yeah, so not getting on the town, I think ours, we're just taking over what CDOT gave to us, but it is pretty awesome to see what can be done there. And ours is awesome too, so just want to bring that up. Administrator Crick and I also had the 4-agency breakfast with Laramie County, R2J, and Loveland and ourselves. Nothing really to report from that I mean, we talked about the mobility hubs and the situation out of there, so.
Yep.
Let's see, Administrator Kirk and I did the R2J dinner in town, and that was really just, talked about the bond and opportunities for Berthoud and Loveland that are being offered in that bond. Let's see here, Administrator Kirk's eval will roll out Thursday, 6 a.m., and it'll close 2 Thursdays later. So that'll be an opportunity. Sergeant Williamson, you are included in that this year, just working a lot with Administrator Kirk. The evals always turn out very well, so you're doing a great job. When I bring up evals, I don't want anyone to get worried.
That's
yeah.
an important part of the process.
So they'll be out for 2 weeks. If there's any stragglers, I'll try to get on them. Of course, I don't know the results. They'll all go to our third party that does the review, but she can let me know of who's still pending or has an outstanding survey. So look out for those on Thursday, and I'll send an email as well. Let's see here, DJ Junior Library. Oh, Zombie Run last Saturday, fantastic, 225 participants. Not quite a 5K. I did measure it afterwards. It's only 2.8 miles. The good thing about that, though, is everyone probably left thinking they have a personal record. That's certainly why I started looking at it, and then I realized, oh, that's not actually a 3.1 mile run. It's only 2.8. So a little confusing course too, but overall, what an awesome event. So I can't wait for next year on that. And finally, we do have our librarian in attendance tonight, and I don't think why, Amy, this is why you're here. I think you're just interested, but they are really wanting to get a sign looked at. It's been brought up several times. Do we have any conversations going on like that?
We've talked internally. I don't know that we've synced up with Amy to work those details out, so that's
I
probably
really
all good.
encourage this.
Yeah.
Their board and Amy are really passionate about this. It's an awesome sign.
It's a
just
great
our-
sign.
Our existing code does not allow it because of a big tree in the way. And they're trying to keep the big tree. They're trying to make a win-win here, and I just don't see why we're not working with them because it's such a plus, so.
I wouldn't say not working with.
I
Well,
appreciate that.
I will,
Amy.
because I'm not seeing anything, and I've been sending out emails, so I'd love to get the two entities together and get this.
We've met multiple times, and yeah, so.
Okay, I just haven't received a response. The last one I even included the board on, and I just wanted to make sure that they are meeting. We are?
The most recent meeting we had was probably, I don't know, 60 days ago, Amy. Is that? You and I met on site. I talked to staff. I think we were waiting for a resubmittal from the library, but.
Did you resubmit? I am literally caught in the middle of this, so I'm a little shocked here that there is. I'm hearing on the other side that there's not, so.
No, I didn't know that you were waiting on anything from us, so.
So I think we just need to sync up and.
All right,
make
so
sure
it's just the
we're all on the same page.
miscommunication here. All right, awesome. That's all I have. Administrator Kirk?
Big fan of this community.
Let's see. I've got 1.5 minutes, I think. I had a list here. Let me get this back up. And I will condense it down for simplicity. We're submitting a GOCO application to Great Outdoors Colorado for $1.1 million to support our next open space purchase. Ann and Carmen Farmer from Colorado Open Lands and staff from GOCO, all kind of working together with other interested parties to get that ready. So we're very hopeful that that will help us make our next big open space purchase. We are selling bonds for the wastewater refunding, hopefully on Thursday. The market has gone kind of wacky again. So even just a week ago, we thought we were going to exceed our savings targets. Right now, as of today, it looks like we'll just meet our savings targets, which is fine. That's what we were shooting for. We were hoping we could do better. We're going to check the ratings desk again tomorrow, and if everything is still looking good, we'll go ahead and sell on Thursday to get that process finally done. Some of these I don't need to really
It's okay.
tonight.
These are good.
At your last meeting, you asked us to provide a printed project update. It's done. I forgot to print it and bring it to you, so that's actually on me.
He's
So
putting in
It
the.
does exist though.
I will email it to you
Yeah.
tonight, and then happy to print those if you'd like.
You put them into the
I'll try-
package too, right?
I'll try to be better about putting them into the package.
Yeah,
That was on me.
That's fine.
But it is done, so. And we have a lot of other updates. A lot of them will actually be captured probably in that report, so I won't belabor them tonight since we're out of time.
Okay, that's awesome.
Oh, we do still have a board study session planned for next Tuesday, just as a reminder about economic development. We talked about that at the last board meeting as well. And that is a follow-up to the strategic plan goal that you set to have an economic development focused strategic plan with Wall.
Don't feel cut off. We can extend this again. It's not the end of the world. You got good updates.
I was going by that clock, so.
Perfect. We'll go by that clock, not my cell phone. That gives me a couple more minutes. And we have tentatively discussed, Ann and I have calendared at least a study session to focus on just the development process, development codes, comp plans, some of the questions that I think you brought up tonight, Trustee Albrecht, which I think are totally appropriate for the first Tuesday in December. So if you could kind of tentatively put that on your schedule. We will not have a meeting the second meeting in December. That fourth Tuesday is, I think it's Christmas Eve, so that's not gonna, we will not have a meeting, and traditionally, we've not had a meeting the second or the fourth Tuesday of December, well, ever since I've been here, so we'll hope to have a study session that first week, our regular meeting to adopt the budget and handle anything else we need to for the end of the year, and then we'll take a break until January.
I'm sorry, say that again. So we'll have a study session the 3rd?
No, the first Tuesday in December, which, oh,
The
sorry, you actually meant the date, the 3rd,
Yes.
not the 3rd Tuesday,
Yes.
sorry, yes, that's, yes, on
Study
December.
session and then a regular meeting the
On
next Tuesday.
On the 10th, and then we would be done for the year.
The work session is next week, you said, next Tuesday, right?
We do have a work session next Tuesday
Right.
planned to go over economic development.
We'll start at 6 PM, right, typically, the studies?
No, they're all there's 6:30 for all of them.
We'll do
There's
6:30, yeah,
Okay.
but we will bring pizza or some other food for the meeting, so if you wanna wait, need to.
After this closes, we'll just let's squeeze your eval into one of those.
Okay.
Early when possible. But not end of December, so.
Either way, it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah, that's great.
We would expect to have both meetings in November. The second meeting would be November 26th, so that'd be a couple days before Thanksgiving, but just so that you're aware that we are planning to have that second meeting in November
No, I'm actually looking at it.
on the fourth Tuesday.
That's it. Cool.
That's it.
That's it, okay. Anything from legal?
No.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Good to
Thanks
see
for
you.
having me again.
Good to have you. Chief, anything?
Just one quick thing. I'll bring it back to the board at a later time, but we received access recently to a new technology for us. It's Urban SKD. It uses cell phone data to give us average speeds for location. I just received a report today for the major portions of the Berthoud city limits, so I can see by hour of the day what the speeds are in the area, so we can hopefully do some more targeted enforcement.
Wow, cool. So like live, cool.
How are we doing?
What's that?
How are we doing?
For the most part, pretty good. I mean, most of the residential streets are below the average, below the speed limit for their average, so there are a few areas that we know are problems that reflect that on there, so.
If you don't have your phone with you, you can't track them. Is that right?
If they don't have their phone on.
Yeah, they don't have a phone. It's monitoring only about 60% of the population's phones that are actually reporting to that, so I'm not sure where they get the data from through Google or some of the other services that are on your phone, but 60% of the phones for the population are reporting to that Urban SKD, so.
That's cool.
We now have access to that to give us some better idea of where our problems are at, so.
No more speeding.
That's cool.
It's me.
That's cool. All right, is there anything else?
I just want to tell you, I mean, when you went through your report, you went to this, you went to that, you went to that, you went to this, you went to that. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate how you represent the town.
Oh,
You
thank
do
you.
so many
Oh,
things,
no,
and
my pleasure.
how much of your time you commit to it.
I
So,
enjoy it. It's
very much appreciated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I did forget to admit, Front Range Passenger Rail, of course, is not always happy. They did want to talk to me about my stances, and I didn't think what I said was anything unprofessional and whatnot, so they kind of backed off. And then at the retreat last week, they wanted me to sign an agreement saying I support the mission and the strategy of Front Range Passenger Rail. And of course, I declined to do that, and so they dropped the issue, but it's getting a little tense, so.
Why
got,
would they-
twice I got sent to the
But
principal.
why would they need you to sign off on it?
Exactly. You should
Yeah.
not be, I'm an appointee from the
That's
NPO. I
strange.
should not be signing any kind of political waiver or agreement.
Fascinating.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Have a good night. I just brought that up because I thought it was extremely interesting.
Yeah.